Hi, everybody. It's Achilles Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It is November 13th, 2024. It's a Wednesday. We're in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library, 8th floor, room 860. So today we're going to work on habit 6, Synergize. And we're almost done this book. We kind of powered through it. It took me almost a year to get through this book, just because I'm basically doing like an audiobook course discussion because I read it. And yeah, this chapter, Synergize, is not the best chapter. There's a little bit, he has one kind of solid reference near the end of the book about like progress and stuff like that. But he has a lot of like testimony. I don't think he was himself conceptually clear really what synergy is beyond the previous stuff that we already talked about. The essence of it fundamentally is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And when you apply that to groups, only by having a win-win context and then having empathy can we have this, the potential for this synergistic thing, which is in some ways to say that like the group you know, it's producing something together that individuals could not do on their own, is really what he's trying to say.
Okay.
But there's not really any, well, the thing that I don't like that's lacking from this is there's no empirical data from psychologists at all.
Okay.
Right? And so if we were going to do a bit more of an academic trajectory on this book, I would actually, you know, take the time to like find some things that psychologists have talked about. Like, for example, in this recent social psychology class I took, the professor in the textbook, she reviewed this part. It's like how to prevent groupthink as a cognitive bias, like, you know what I mean? And they went through all these steps, like these psychologists kind of studied how to like make it less. I think some things they just get funding for, so it's more developed as like a, you know, conceptually and with its research. And so for this chapter, it just doesn't seem very, you know, developed conceptually, and there's not really much empirical support. We understand what he's saying, and you know, like at that abstract level, I can agree with what his argument is, but scientifically, I like it to be a bit more robust. So I'm going to fall in my pocket. So I think those are some limitations. I think that it was of all of the chapters, it was, I think he just kind of like, I don't want to say he rushed it, like writing it, but there's definitely a difference between this and then like the inside out one, like just the introduction of different concepts that kind of make you, you know, or he just is not explaining it well. That could be another thing. Which means he just kind of doesn't understand it. Like, I think that his understanding, he gives this example about being in a classroom, you know, and they threw away the syllabus and kind of reworked some stuff. He gives examples of just him and his wife, like just being, but it's the thing that I don't like about this habit in contrast to the other ones is it's not really conceptually distinct that much. Right? Like a lot of the examples he gives are just things that apply to the 5th habit, like to be empathetic or whatever, right? So I think he could have, you know, like he gives one example of like the guy who was talking about the atomic bomb, or was it just nuclear energy? I forget. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that there is room for clarity. It's half the length. And again, at the beginning, it's a lot of testimony instead of like other or anecdotal evidence, instead of other ways to either explain it or go through it. So that's fine. Like from a pedagogical perspective, I'll just get through the content faster, you know? But it's like I think he's just kind of trying to take up space. Like maybe the publisher said it has, like you need to have at least 20 pages or something like that. Like, I don't fucking know, whatever. But you know what I mean? Like if that's the, like you just, yeah, I don't want to speculate on that. So, okay, before we go into this, David and I were talking about, well, something.
So you're saying that the reason you don't like it is because he didn't, how to say, like justify his opinion or his his argument very well, not like logically not very sound, or like he doesn't give evidence or analytical process. That the process to come up with his whatever opinion is not as good as the other chapters. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, like I wrote this really good email to one of my professors recently, like 2 a.m. Sometimes I just start saying something and I go on a huge philosophical tangent. It's like a treatise. I just like prove something. And so I was talking about the problem of psychology defining or existence proofing concepts or constructs. So if you say like the construct of aggression, how do you, like, what is it? Is it just behavior, or is intention necessary, right? Does it have to be perceived? Can someone be aggressive and no one gets hurt and it's still aggressive? Can you be aggressive to a tree? Does it have to be someone that feels pain? Right? Like, what do we really mean by this thing? And how do we observe its phenomena? Because we only just see behavior. Do you just mean someone who's like moving in a certain way and like that's aggression? And so similarly with synergy, like what is synergy? Like, can you point to it? Because you're saying this thing exists. Is it a process? Is it an outcome? Right? Because he says that like there's almost a fallacy of equivocation in the way it's being used sometimes, that in some instances it's interpreted as a process or a state of people when they get this sense of vulnerability. But like, is that what you mean? It's just transparent and vulnerable communication? Or is that there's like because when he says the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, the whole is like he uses like gestalt, or you can use the word holistic. It just means the totality of all the things incorporated. But that's not the examples he gives necessarily. The examples he gives is like they had this course, they listened to each other, and then they cooperated and brainstormed, and then they got some different result. And it was a really interesting experience, you know?
So what has to do with the whole bigger than the part?
But yeah, like what is it? You know, I think it's that all of our perspectives together is greater than any one perspective.
Is it true?
Not necessarily. I think that's one of the other things that's wrong about this thing, is that like Ayn Rand, for example, she like talks, not that she's the, be all end all, but one criticism that she would make is that it stifles creative independence. And you kind of, and even like, it's Heidegger talks about like the they self, and like the they self is like this averageness of what everybody just agrees to, and any sense of exceptionalness gets actually reduced and cut to conform to what the average conversation or like what pop culture talks about.
Yeah.
And so that's directly in contradiction to this synergistic perspective. And like
mediocre.
Sorry?
Mediocre?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I think that that's not really talked about at all in this thing. And so one thing would be like, everybody has an equal perspective, or everybody can contribute equally. That's just not true. Right. I think it's fair to say that let's allow everyone the potential to speak, like the free speech thing. But if you don't have anything to say, you're not like forced to say something. Right. Like if I don't know anything about like organic chemistry, which I don't really at all, I'm not going to really comment on it. I can ask questions to clarify for my own understanding, but I don't have anything to say. What synergy am I going to bring to the table? I don't know. Right.
But what? Yeah. But did you hear something about a new, like a kind of a taste of a political correctness? Like if you everyone is equal. Don't be so arrogant. Don't give me that expert feel. You sounds like you are not treating people equally.
Well, that's part of that's so in the DEI, and like it's an argument against wokeness, right? That there's a difference between equality and equity. Equality is that all things are the same. Equity is that everyone has the opportunity to access something or participate at the same level.
But how do you recently I heard an argument between a guy, I think it's a conservative guy, in the US, they came to campus and the student challenge him, say, hey, you have all the training, you're much elder than us, and whatever, and then for you to kind of argue with us, is it unfair? Because we just came into the university, we are so young, we don't have that life experiences,
Sure.
And you have all the training, you're trained to be, argue, whatever. So how he responded? He said, well, are you old enough to vote? He said, yes. Then okay, then we're because we're talking about voting, because we're all voter. I'm just talking to you as a voter to voter. So this, we are equal. But are you satisfied? What do you think? If somebody challenged you, say, hey, even for you to talk logic or argue with us is already unfair because you have already received such a good education. While I'm just how do you?
Well, yeah. Like you can use it if you're using your I make this criticism to people that go to university too. If you're gaining knowledge as an intellectual prowess to not necessarily manipulate, but to like prove that you're right or create a sense of superiority or be better than others, right? That is, you could say, even unethical, and the difference is that I take an educational perspective. So I will help you criticize me, right? By teaching a form of criticism, i.e. like being philosophical with critical thinking and reasoning and like emotional intelligence. Because maybe you feel something, right? And it's not like a fallacy, and that's why it's almost therapeutic. I'm not licensed to give therapy, but it becomes self-therapeutic to try to think about what you feel and you have someone to talk to. That's kind of what therapy is, right? Understanding what's going on with us. And then we can make a decision and we can move on from that. But socially, it's just a social factor. Okay.
But what if I say, hey, you just say you educate me? What makes you, that sounds like you're higher than me.
Yeah. It's not about educating. It's like I should read the email that I wrote this professor. It's about teaching. Maybe I'm going to read the email because anyone can be the learner, right? Like being like, yeah, I'll read the email. So we'll do that next. So I'm going to read this first.
Okay.
So in synergy, is it a real thing? That's a question. What is this phenomena and how can it be measured? Right? Is it measured by its process or is it measured by some form of output? Like, how long can you hold the weight and what's your maximum lift? Like how much can you lift, or what did you get out of it? Like, it's how well we're working together, or is it the production, like the TV show we produced at the end of our working together, that we're evaluating the degree of synergistic connection between each other, right? So synergy sounds like psychobabble. That's the problem. Psychobabble is the appearance of a scientific term that's not scientific, right? An alternative word that does have scientific rigor is empowerment. And we defined that a month ago, right? Where it's the socio-cultural, political emboldening of the rights of an individual within a group. They feel that the group supports them and they can express their autonomy in that socio-cultural context. That's empowerment, right?
So empowerment is positive, but the bubble is negative.
The bubble?
The psychological bubble that you just mentioned.
Well, synergy, psychobabble.
Oh, psychobabble.
Psychobabble is like a critical thinking error. Or when we're criticizing a theory, one of the evaluative, in this textbook, Introduction to Psychology, they go through these 6 modes to evaluate any theory or any claim. It's like an extra critical thinking thing. And one of them that because psychologists kind of came out of distinguishing themselves from magicians and psychics. They took an empirical, like there's people that take this like non-empirical spiritual approach to the psyche, right? And then the psychologist is the study of the psyche, but scientifically. It's to say, well, what is this? When I say soul, I just mean mind, right? But what is this thing? And how do we really know?
So do you think those, like the palm reader or the, what do you call that? Look at the stars,
Astrology.
astrology. What do you think those are psycho bubble? Or?
Yeah, they can have psychobabble within them. They're basically just pseudoscience. They're not scientific. Like people that look for ghosts are not really scientific. They might use an electromagnetic meter, but that's not going to measure ghosts because electromagnetism is like everywhere, right? All of the wiring in a house has electromagnetism. Okay, so what is synergy? And some philosophers can be very critical of this psychobabble if it is the case, or it's just a poor way of explaining some phenomena. Like Covey was the beginnings of understanding something maybe we didn't talk about before, but we have to chip away. It's like almost like understanding emotions or philosophizing about something we haven't pinned down language yet is like the Taoist uncarved block, or an ice cube that's sitting there's like a gem inside the ice cube, but there's a lot of ice around it. And it's sitting in the water. And every time you cut a piece off, it kind of rotates a bit and changes and reorients itself. You keep on shrinking it down until you get to the core of what it is, or like a pearl, right?
Could religion be a psychobabble?
Yeah, religion, it's like they may use psychobabble within it. Like when people use the word quantum, like when Covey was like, having a quantum phase at the beginning of writing this book. We haven't seen that word for a little while. That's psychobabble because it's not actually quantum. It's not. Quantum is a physics term, right? It's nothing to do with planning your day.
What about some conspiracy theory?
Yeah,
The deep state, like the whole world is controlled by what do you call it? What's an organization? They have their own secret symbol, logo.
Yeah, like the Illuminati or something crazy like that. Yeah, the thing with those theories is that it's just there's a lot of assumptions, right? And it becomes a slippery slope fallacy or like a straw man. Like all of this stuff is hinging on this one thing. And then when you take that assumption away, everything just kind of crumbles down, right? So, I wouldn't really, like that's why we want to learn critical thinking and how do we develop our thought process in a healthy way, right? And so some philosophers like empiricists would, and I think this form of empiricism is good, that we want to not over reliance on verificationism, but to observe the phenomena, it is an existence claim in itself. We know the thing exists. Like in our problems with God, it's an existence issue, a big part of it. Like, well, why do we even really know, right? But if you see the object, like even though I see it from this perspective, you see it from that perspective, we now can agree on one common phenomena, and then we can even talk about different ways to measure it. And so this synergy thing, well, what is it really we're talking about here? What distinguishes synergy from one context to the other? So for example, you could say a state of flow, or maybe they'll use the phrase psychological safety. This is like a safe zone where people feel they're not going to be attacked, right? But just having a safe zone is a different thing than some kind of emergent outcome. The emergence is that all of these properties at this level of relation together create a whole new phenomena, like water droplets. A water droplet has its own structure and you could say physical chemical system, but many of them at a specific altitude will make clouds or a rainbow, right? Or vapor, you could say. That's just droplet, but they're basically the same thing. And so some philosophers, i.e. empiricists, would say, hey, this is not the case. If you can't demonstrate to me this thing, then it's not even real. And so there's this famous quote by Hume. He says, if we take in our hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matters of fact and existence? No. Commit it then to the flames, for it can only be nothing but sophistry and illusion.
Let me ask you, David Hume, if I remember correctly, he's also a Christian. Yeah, you can check. He believes in religion. So with all his, this doubting, spirit, how can he?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. The Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy says that though Hume's final view on religion is not clear, what is certain is that he was not a theist in any traditional sense. He wrote this paper on belief or on miracles, and he argues why it absolutely cannot be the case that miracles exist, because they're violations of the laws of nature. And so we would never even be able to see them because we are bound by the laws of nature. So if something happened like light or some ghost, you don't have the eyes to even see it. All miracles are beyond human sense perception.
Okay, so but I heard this kind of argument. Maybe you heard that also. They say, "Oh, you just quoted the Hume's argument about miracle," but you believe in, for example, you think the scientific science, but they say science is also a belief. It's just nothing. It's just like a religion is a belief. Science on the bottom line, on the very very bottom, you're also making some assumptions, and then you're believing those assumptions. So you're also a believer. What's the difference between science and religion?
There are different kinds of assumptions. Like one is that there's this cosmological assumption that we live in an ordered universe. Ordered meaning that like causality exists within this universe, that there's a cause and effect, that when certain phenomena are together, they will consistently produce a specific result. And science is an attempt to understand that. And so the way we know whether that is we can measure our success by just saying how frequently are your predictions correct, right? If you say you're a good doctor, well, how many lives did you save? If you say that the doctor is no better than the priest, we say, okay, fine. Let's take 100 sick people, give them to the priest, 100 sick people, give them to the doctor, and see what happens. You could have random sicknesses. Like there's ways to try to make it as equal as possible. And by and large, aside from the placebo effect, the doctor is going to make people a lot better, right? And the priest can use any mode of tools at their disposal, and so can the doctor. The doctors are going to be quite vast, and there's going to be physical things, right? Like one time I had it's got something stuck in my nose, and they had to clean my nose out. It was terrible. But he had this little thing that he used. What's a priest going to do? That's not what that's for, right? So there's a clear difference, because the content of one of them, I don't know why it keeps on turning off, is directly different than the content of the other.
Right, but they will argue. They will argue on the religion side. They say, yeah, but all you look at is just some phenomenon appearance, but God is deciding whose life gonna be end at what time. So even because it's the priest is also a human being, even though he cannot save as many people as the doctor, but because people believe in God, God will decide who will end this life and go to heaven or go to hell.
Yeah, it just becomes an empirical thing. Like, how do you know? Right? Like, how would you test that? And again, it's importing some existence of something that we actually don't know if it really even exists. Like the synergy thing. Like how do you know when synergy occurs? Like lightning, if you're like, I'm going to tell you when lightning has struck, right? And you just take a video camera and you're like, how many times did lightning go above the house? And you just get it from a bunch of different angles. And you can say there was no lightning last night. Why? Because there were no clouds. Or it was wintertime and lightning just didn't occur when it was snowing. Cloud structures are different at that temperature, right? And so part of it is the falsification issue, is that some theoretical properties are speculative, right? And so initially, to be scientific, you have to be kind of philosophical. You have to say, what is the nature of this thing that I'm even talking about? Right?
But they say all your argument is using, your rationality, right? But the religion is beyond rationality. It's something that you cannot use causality, whatever. It's just a belief. It's just, some people just have the feeling. Some people just have the calling from whatever. know?
You're just not being philosophical. You're being artistic. You know, you're using your mind in a different way. And you can do that, but you're not necessarily going to get truth. Right? If you want truth, it's like trying to get, you know, it's like trying to make a turkey.
What do you mean by truth?
Truth, like correspondence truth, or predictability, or an accurate representation of nature. You know? Okay, let us continue. Okay, so there's this quote by Hume. So he's in the wizard's tower. You know, that's a spell. You can learn that spell. It's like one of the skepticism spells. You cast that spell, and then it dissolves the ghosts of madness. Yeah, it's good. Helps you out sometimes.
I think that's it's a courage to be.
So this is the synergize. So what do we mean by this? And all like it's like energized, but not really. You know, it's like you're being energized by the group. What are we talking about, right? So let's dive into what Covey has to say. And like I said before, we want to look for like operationalizable terms that the word is being used to pick out some measurable phenomena in our observations. If not, then it gets a little confusing, right? So in the 30th anniversary edition book, we are starting this chapter on page 308, Principles of Creative Cooperation. So I'm just going to read through the slides on the main principles in this text. So in crucial things, unity; in important things, diversity; in all things, generosity. So, or did you say generality? Let's just check here. No, it's generosity. Yeah. He's just trying to talk about like the diversity is different perspectives, and all of those different perspectives in unity creates generosity is not really a good word to say here.
But this sounds very vague. This whole thing.
Yeah, this quote is just there. It's the first quote he uses, right? So I think the Barnum effect is a good critique. That's what you're saying. The Barnum effect is the same thing with astrology, right? It needs to be a bit more, you know, or you need to at least give us some kind of an argument and then clarify what you mean by generosity or diversity. But I'm trying to help him out here a little bit to say, what does this really mean?
What can I ask you? You know, I also heard some people say, "Oh, you know, when I meditate, I can feel the energy from the universe that enrich my soul." You know, I heard a lot of this kind of energy, the chi, the whatever. You know,
Yeah.
Was this a psycho?
Yeah, that's psychobabble right there for sure, 100%. Because I used to study chi and qigong, and I asked the question, well, if it's energy, and I'm controlling it to some degree, what would the energy be? And then I asked the question, then I brought up the fact that there are 4 fundamental forces in the universe: gravity, strong and weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism. And so which one of those would it be, right? And I was like, well, probably none. Because it's not like I can go to like a wire and absorb its energy. Like humans don't, that's like a superhero. We don't actually function that way. But I think I do feel heat when I'm doing these breathing techniques and stuff like that, you know? And so, you know, it would be kinetic energy. And you could measure that. You could have thermal, infrared like thing, and you could look at a qigong meditator at the beginning and at the end, and then you could actually see it, right? That now we can talk about it a little bit. But if you can't measure it, it quickly becomes psychobabble. And some, unfortunately, look at that person. Oh my goodness. Wow. It's like a kitten came back from the wilderness.
So good to see you guys.
There
So
we go.
excited.
Very good.
To see me or what?
Of course.
Oh,
It's better to have you here than Santa Claus.
yeah,
Super good.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So bad.
So,
gonna seek the
It's so
side.
beautiful, you know. Look at this lady.
yeah, she's the best.
Yeah, she is.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you can just pull up these slides on your phone if you want. Does that work? Or your computer?
I don't have a computer.
Okay, so yeah, I posted them when I finished them today. Okay, so next principle is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's fundamentally what he means, and I think that he observed some cool phenomena working as a teacher and in business and stuff like that. And then he just basically, I think he's still trying to work out really what this is, but I just don't like that psychobabble not being empirical about what exactly we're talking about, right? And we're doing chapter 6, Synergy. Yeah. And he says, he gives this quote by Carl Rogers, that which is most personal is most general. So Carl Rogers is speaking to this, like, I don't know, almost unconscious element of being human that is very personal to you, but everybody has a similar experience of just like being conscious, you know, for example.
You know, because what I remember, Carl Rogers, he's a, you know, he's a psychotherapist, right?
Yeah.
His way is like, you know, he created, well, not just him, you know, all the he created a safe environment between the therapist and the client, and then he encouraged, you know, what's there's a
person-centered therapy.
Yeah, person-centered therapy, and then he can talk, and then sometimes the unconsciousness will come into consciousness. And
yeah, that's more Freud for him. It's
Freud.
like person-centered therapy is to let the client direct the course of therapy.
Right. Is this science or this pseudoscience?
This is scientific. He's like a clinical psychologist. He's a humanist psychologist. And
so this science. Okay.
Yeah, so he's basically saying all people need to feel safe for them to engage in some healing process. And those specific things that they would talk about will be unique to them, but the process is general. All human beings kind of need this sense of safety with somebody, and then they can.
How does his approach to connect to what he said here? Like personal is general or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's a little contradictory, right? But I'm trying to help interpret from my reading of Carl Rogers. Like I read a little bit of him. I did this class this summer, personality psychology, and
which is most personal is most general.
Yeah. Anyways, that's fine. So next, empower people and organizations to significantly increase their performance, capability, in order to achieve worthwhile purposes through understanding and living principle-centered leadership. That was the mission statement example he gave. So again, that's just almost like a summary of this book in one sentence. Really, right?
Okay, that's it.
Really? That's it. So slide 2. We seek not to imitate the masters, rather we seek what they sought. And so this was like Eastern philosophy. I'm not specifically sure if it's Confucius or what, but yeah, it's not.
We seek not to. Okay, I don't know. This sounds a little bit vague too.
So what the meaning of this one would be is trying to just be like somebody else is missing the mark, right? Learn from somebody else, striving towards their best by you being your best. So what they sought, you could say, is being your best. And the principle of being your best is what you want. Don't emulate the master. So for example, if I'm really good at playing pool, but you like kayaking, you don't have to try to emulate pool playing. You just become a good kayaker. If a person of your intelligence and competence and commitment disagrees with me, then there must be something to your disagreement that I don't understand, and I need to understand it. You have a perspective, a frame of reference I need to look at. So this is in the wrong chapter. This is the previous chapter. But like I said before, there's some issues of conceptual clarity. And we do this, we understand this categorically, right? Does this go inside the synergy chapter, or does this go inside the seek to understand then be understood chapter? Well, this clearly is using the terms understand here, right? So that's where it's like he maybe just didn't have enough material, or he didn't fully understand what it was. I'm not, I don't know. He could have published a second edition of this book 30 years later too. You didn't have to keep it the way it was, but who cares? The more genuine the involvement, the more sincere and sustained the participation in analyzing and solving problems, the greater release of everyone's creativity and of their commitment. Okay, so we just got a little bit more clear in what he means by synergize, okay? There's this property of involvement. That is kind of think win-win. You could maybe say that, right? How is it distinct? Like, how is stuff in this chapter different than everything else is the question. Sincerity, that's almost habit 2, right? The sustained participation, that's different. but also it could be win-win again. Solving problems, okay, that could be something that is achieved through synergizing or even analysis. And then releasing of everyone's creativity, that's different. Commitment, that goes back to habit 2 again. So we're a little all over the place here, right? And so that's why conceptually for me, this is probably the worst chapter from definitely a philosophical perspective, because like, what are you really talking about? You know what I mean? And that's why we need to go through it this way. Okay, so next slide. Principles of creative cooperation. So this is the beginning of the chapter. So synergy, the exercise and manifestation of all the other habits. So that's a crappy definition. That sucks, man. You get a 1 out of 10 for that. You can't say that. Like, again, he's going from the position that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but you have given 0 distinguishing properties, because the 7th habit you would say is the exercise and manifestation of all the other habits, because it's the renewal chapter, right? Highest form focuses human endowments. So self-conscious or self-awareness, being conscious, which is like your morality, independent will, and one more, I forget. And then win-win motivation, empathetic communication. Okay, so the win-win motivation. So again, that's just what this is just saying is that you have habits 1, 5, 4, and 5 is this thing. So those things, Synergy's highest form helps you do these things. Sure, okay, you can talk about that, but you still haven't defined it well. You haven't given me distinguishing properties that make me know it's a different thing than other things, right? When I say the mouse on the table, we all know it's this object specifically and nothing else. So when you're saying synergy, you need to, or if you're going to talk about this thing, if it's a different thing, then it ought to be distinguishable from everything else, right? The essence of principle-centered leadership and parenting. Okay, so again, principle-centered leadership is habit 2, fundamentally, right? Where we talked about the centeredness and being centered towards principles, or centered towards, I would say, the philosophical process in some ways, right? Because then you can discuss and evaluate, like, what is the right principle? And that's not really ever talked about here. And then parenting, which just goes back to essentially his communication or relationship with his wife may have been very synergistic. Neither of them on their own knew what to do. And then through some cooperating and communicating, they found like a really awesome way to solve problems or do stuff, whatever that is. So this principle of creative cooperation catalyzes, unifies, and unleashes power within people. Okay, so those are some the reasons why you would be synergistic, but we still haven't had a clear definition of what this thing is, because it's a property of a group. And so we ought to be able to distinguish groups by their synergy. We haven't seen that yet.
Very big words, good words, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. That's the vagueness again, right? And that's the Barnum effect. So when you get your fortune cookie and you're like, this just speaks to me, right?
Yeah.
And then we slip it to your friend. You're like, oh my goodness, it's like the best fortune cookie ever. Like I feel it right now. It's like amazing. And it's just because it's so vague. The Barnum effect is to use very vague terms that apply to everybody. That's what astrology does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or people that are psychic mediums. So like, I can feel it. It sounds like a, and they'll do this thing where they kind of go through the letters, and then you'll be like, oh, when you get the G, you're like, George. And they're like, yeah, it was George. And then,
What about the Carl Jung's theory? Are they also a little bit?
yeah, not psychobabble. They're just unfalsifiable. It's understandable, but like we would have to, like you should be able to show cognitively that the archetypes exist as schemas in infants. Or if you just mean schema, that's a thing in itself. But there would have to be some evidence. Like, for example, Chomsky talks about how we have,
Norman Chomsky?
Yeah, how we have the structures of grammar embedded in us, right? That children just kind of understand the cat is on the mat. right? Before it even really fully comprehends language. Like the on the mat as a predicate is understood by kids. And so there's this structure of grammar, how ideas are related to each other that's embedded in our instincts. And so for you to say that Carl Jung's archetypes, you'd have to argue that they really exist. You'd have to say something about, you have to show it somehow, that there is some instinct there. There's some cognitive structure that we're born with that leads us to these archetypes.
Does that put the lack of this? Does that put Young's theory same with astrology or palm reading?
No, I wouldn't. It's a spectrum, right? When you're evaluating a theory, one of the properties from Kuhn's criteria of adequacy, our philosophical toolbox, right? We have that drawer.
Thomas Kuhn?
Yeah. How we evaluate theories with the philosophy of science. And simplicity is one, or Occam's razor is one of those mechanisms, right? We don't want to make assumptions in the things we're thinking, because that, if you look at the structure of the argument, how it fits together, if one of the things is assumed, the structure, like the conclusion can't be known then. And so the structure just starts to fall apart. And so that's where we get the quote, proportion all of your beliefs to the evidence. Don't let your belief go beyond. You can be hopeful of things, right? That's like an emotional disposition, but it acknowledge that there's possibility. And we could talk about Burns when we have unrealistic expectations. I will make $1 million,
Well, what about the Freudians talk about Oedipus complex, right?
Again, like, where is the evidence of this, right? Like, you can also say that, like, as children, like, we can make an astrology example. Like, Jupiter is such a large planet, and when it's close to the sun, it makes babies' brains swell because of its gravity. Like, you can make up a whole bunch of crazy things, right? Unfalsifiable claims in some way. Maybe you could falsify that, actually, that one. I'm actually turning it into a science. Right?
But wasn't that, thank you, but wasn't that Freudian, one of his famous thing is the talk therapy, right?
Sure.
There's a young lady was suffering, I don't know, what's the word, crazy, like
Hysteria?
Hysteria. And then people at the time, the Victorian think that she is, there's some evil coming to her body.
Mm-hmm.
But Freud, during the talk therapy, he found out she's sexually oppressed.
Yeah, that's part of the problem with therapies is like,
Right.
Like the psychoanalysis can be imposing assumptions into what the person is saying and interpreting things to support their theory. And any disagreement, they would just say is transference.
Right,
So-
transference, yeah. But he successfully, because after the lady talk freely and then maybe going to her is unconscious, is unconsciousness, this whole thing is scientific or not, or just something invented, unconscious.
Freudian unconscious is a different thing. It's where, like, the id is, and the id conceptually has no real justification. It's more of like a way to understand the death drive instinct and the reality principle and these kinds of things, right? And our motivations of, like, Thanatos and Eros or whatever. Like the sex drive or like the creative drive versus the death drive or destruction.
So this is all just theories.
It's a metaphysical theory. So Hume would be going in with a blowtorch,
Mhm.
right? You'd be burning Freud's castle down.
Mhm.
And so, right, like, when you make assumptions, it's like building a castle out of cars or cards. When you're being philosophical and scientific, you're just building a structure that you can stand on, right? So you can reach the stars. Without it, you're just like wobbling, like, whoa, right? And faith maybe is just like, don't worry about it, everything's gonna be fine. You're like, okay, but like, sometimes it just might not work out, the cards will fall. Your beliefs do not lead you to what you expect them to. And then people will rationalize, or they'll, like, have backwards, like, corrective thinking, where they just change what they said before and they have a new perspective in light of the evidence, right? But it just proves their theory, like, they were wrong.
Is capitalism also scientific? Communism, capital, all these social theories?
You can make them scientific. You could have like different distribution of resources in different groups and have some measurement or goal. You can apply that to it if you want, but it's an economic relation that governments have within and between. You know. All right, the bus is continuing. So, a relationship, the parts within the whole have to each other. Sure, okay, and that's the synergy thing. So that's really what we're talking about here, is that people being vulnerable and open and communicating and doing all these things with themselves, with each other, have some other effect. It can't just be the relation between the members. It has to be something else, like synergy, right? Synergy, you know, what is this thing? So it talks about adventurous, unknown outcomes of discovery and creativity. You have to have this like courage to be engaged in synergy with others. So let's, oh wait, one more. Okay. And he gives an example. Plants grow better when they're together than if separated, because they change the soil. A challenge of applying principles of creative cooperation and social interactions. So again, he gives examples where there's like a bank and this other firm that are in disagreement, and then he brings these principles to them, and then they're able to negotiate and cooperate. Value and respect differences by building on strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Okay, that's good. He has this value of differences thing throughout this synergy process, but it's still really resonating a habit 5 kind of a context, that being empathetic, you know, I guess it's one step past the empathy, but you could have incorporated that part in the habit 5. It's not distinct as a different entity, right? So this is going to facilitate a more open, trusting, and giving context. It's less adversarial, selfish. People are going to be less defensive and they won't have to have this need to protect themselves, right? And so what I get from this is that he's talking about a social context that is psychologically safe, which is what I'm trying to do here with the philosophy study. It's like an educational context, right? Okay, let's look at the book here. How you got book? There's one book each.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I got 2 there. It's fine. So 308.
You use the education again. I need to ask you again.
Oh, we didn't read the thing. Should I read the thing?
Yeah, please.
Okay, we're gonna take a little break from this for 1 second. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna read you guys an email. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen though, because I don't want to disclose who the email was to. Okay, so I was emailing this professor. It's gonna take me a minute to read this, but I'll read it. So I took 3 courses with this professor, and when you take multiple courses with the same person, you get to see their approach to teaching stuff and how they conceptualize. So you actually learn more about how to think about the thing, not just the content itself. So I said, the approach you take is very good because you make an effort to observe, analyze, and demonstrate the science behind specific questions. It's like you take a phenomena, i.e. addictions, and if it were a 3-dimensional object, you take the X, Y, Z perspective. Each issue is approached in a methodological way so that the student can develop a basic and comprehensive understanding of the subject the course is built around, upon, or about. You are philosophical in your understanding, and the sequence of and the content within each week shows that. There is a meta-narrative in how you construct your courses. As someone who has taken like 130 undergraduate courses, me, taking a lot, I find there's more learning at a higher level of understanding when you see someone teach multiple classes. You learn how they think and approach topics in general because you have observed them do it through multiple courses. I find that my approach is to, number 1, define what the thing is, showing what instances apply and those that don't. So that's the category thing. So if synergy is this, then why do these things there? They should be over here. Number 2, show the existence of the thing in the world, demonstrating an observable phenomena that is tied to an accurate development of a definition is very important. I think of an example of showing what light is to students. Everyone knows what light is, but do they? What are we doing with language in the context of teaching? Is the purpose to get the student to conform to the language being used, like winning the language game? I find that the purpose of teaching is when a person who has observed phenomena, so you're arguing like education or being a teacher has a condescending or could be patronizing relationship with the student, right?
Patronizing, what do you mean?
Like you're speaking down to them, or you're
Oh.
speaking from a position of superiority,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that in itself could be problematic. That's why I'm reading this, right? So let's see if what I say here responds to this problem you're identifying, right? So I say, I find that the purpose of teaching is when a person who has observed phenomena in the cosmos, and like the teacher, like, why would you teach, right? So you've observed something that's real. Like I see this thing, or I'm observing waterfalls, doesn't matter. And has developed a sophisticated knowledge base to explain that phenomena. So it's not just observation, there is this knowledge component to it too, right? More than the average experiencer. So people just walk around, but they're not focused on the thing. Because why is Einstein Einstein? Like, what made that guy think of that stuff about light? Like, how come he figured some stuff out and nobody else did? What did he do, right? They are in a capacity, the person who's observing these things and has knowledge, to use language to another, the student, so that the other person, the student, can see in mind what the teacher has allocated over their study and observation. The teacher is supposed to bring the other person up to speed so they can observe the phenomena at the same level. The purpose of the teacher is to provide a person willing to learn. A student is only a person willing to learn. That's all it ever is. I'm willing to learn. You're a student. You're also a philosopher too, kind of. The opportunity to skip all of the errors or mistakes in understanding that they did. So, for example, if I want to observe worms, I'm like a worm scientist. I don't know what the hell the name is, but that's what I am, right? And I'm going out in the wintertime, and I'm a diligent scientist, though. I'm checking every day, 3 times a day, like 8 a.m., 3, 5, every single day. Well, after you do that for 1 year or even 5 years, you would say for this whole 8 months, worms don't appear, right? So if I'm going to teach you, I would say if the temperature goes below like 7 degrees, don't waste your time. You don't have to do it. You can do other things, right? That's the teacher's supposed to make it accelerated, the learning, right? The purpose of the so if you have to do everything the teacher did, what is the purpose of being a student? You can just do it yourself. It would actually be faster. There's self-environment, that's 1-to-1, right? There's nothing in between, is less than self-other person, teacher, environment. If you cut out the middle person, there's less error, it's faster, etc. The purpose of the teacher is at least to speed up the process. What is it about a person of knowledge plus experience that makes a person learning from them better than learning on their own? So why does teaching or education even a thing? The answer to this is the property that makes one a good teacher, meaning that the learning from them provided unknown information or information faster one could attain on their own. A clear benefit in comprehension and speed would be present. The only way for comprehension and speed to be present in a teacher-student context compared to solo learning is that the student can learn with greater speed and equivalent or less comprehension than the teacher. The goal is 1-to-1 comprehension, but obviously that's not possible. There are limits to language and mental representations, like memories being reconstructed every time they're brought to mind. No recollection of a memory is exactly the same within ourselves, not to mention when 2 different people exchange ideas, the game of telephone or problems of interpretation. Questions for the teacher. So if you're a teacher, here's what you ask yourself. How fast can the people see the phenomena? So I want you to see the worms. So I'm going to take you to the spot. I want you to see the gazelle. So I'm going to take you to where they're grazing, right? You don't have to scour the whole jungle. I'll show you where the answer is, right? What can I do as the teacher as an intervention so they can see it exists? Well, I'm going to take you to the spot. That's me taking you there is me being a teacher. That's the existence phenomenon. I want to show you what a flame is, and I'll create this thing, Bunsen burner flame, right? You saw it, you know it's real. That's one thing religion can't do. Well, then show me God. If you could rub the thing and the genie comes out, you're like, holy crap, Robin Williams, where'd you come from, right? How could I make from the Aladdin movie? How can I make their understanding of the phenomena robust and accurate? Another way of saying comprehension. These are the things, properties. These are the things, properties. These are the things, properties of the thing. For example, you can show a frequency of occurrence. Here are conditions for causality, right? Like these are things that would show that you understand the thing, right? The cosmos has fixed elements to it, time and space. Talk about that. So we can approach all phenomena as things which can be observed in some way, or how do we know they exist? If not observed, but theorized, then observation or some form of falsification is necessary for it to be known or real, like string theory. Where like we calculated some shit, there's a good chance there's these little squigglies all over the place, right? So if that's the case, let's try to find them. Then we got the Higgs boson and the particle collider, the hadron collider, or whatever. Okay.
But okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I'm trying to mimic what I heard from the political correctness. These
Okay.
days. They will say after I hear this, they will say, "Huh," but I sense some power relation in this teacher-student relation. There's unparalleled power. You're using your knowledge as a power. The Foucault's theory, they said that every relation has power.
Sure.
So there's a power there. You are manipulating someone. You're
Well-
not being fair to other people.
Okay, let me finish this and then we'll get, because I might answer it without, yeah. So then I say, I find that many psychological concepts and constructs are difficult to see and clearly define. The DSM classification comes to mind, or phenomena like aggression. Does it need to be only violent behavior, or is malicious intent required? How do we observe intent? How does the observing psychologist make existence claims about the subjective experience of the experiencing psychologist? The observing psychologist says, you're being aggressive. The experiencing psychologist says, you're not listening. Does this mean that the existence of phenomena is relative to the subject experience versus objective observation property? In the example above, the experiencing psychologist cannot know the existence of aggression even though they are being aggressive. When someone's angry, they don't know they're angry. Is it really anger then? What does it matter in terms of existence if the experiencing, I wrote this in just one shot, by the way. If the experiencing psychologist only has the memory of being aggressive, what we want is for people to not be, or to have self-control. Becoming aggressive, not knowing it, and then remembering that they were like that in the future does not help them see it in the moment. Does the relationship between self and other have to be one-to-one for an existence claim to be true about the self-psychology? The person experiencing and compared to the person observing that person experiencing. So what does this apply to? How is this relevant to anything? Well, it applies to religious belief, the belief in the supernatural, delusional thinking, psychosis, distorted thinking, existential claims, what is real, psychedelic experiences like DMT, mushrooms, whatever, and spiritual experiences. The depressed person's emotions are being experienced, but are a product of distorted thinking and poor habits. The observer sees the context of a present feeling of sadness and recognizes it's a product of a series of poor decisions and self-deprecation. The person experiencing sadness has a present-minded perspective that is based on internal dialogue passing through their minds and not making decisions that will increase their well-being, like pro-socializing, exercising, and a healthy diet. What exists? The experiencer is in a present emotion. The observer, a person who led themselves to a bad feeling. If they learn to be different, they will feel different. How can two different things exist at the same time about the same thing? This violates the law of identity. 1 equals 1. A thing must always be equal to itself. How can the feelings of the self and the observation of the other be different if they are about or are the same thing? Notice how I started about teaching and I went into this whole other thing, because there's a larger category of stuff. If you understand that, the teaching thing will make a lot of sense, right? And it's about mental representation and the relation between self and other. It's the same thing for teaching. The wisdom in this is that there's something beyond our experience and observations. At this point, I had no idea where I was going. I was just steering it. I was like, I'd have to just drive this ship here a little bit.
All this in one shot?
Yeah, we'll see where we end up. We haven't even got to the meaty part yet. So there's an argument coming up. There's 12 premises for the fucking thing. Something greater must exist to make this. What I did is I just keep on doing the logic. This, you learn how I philosophize. I'm writing a bunch of premises. Like, if all this stuff is true, what will be the next thing? And then if it's false, I'm like, it can't be that. It has to be something else, right? Something greater must exist to make self other in relation to the experience and observation of the self. The only way to create a one-to-one relationship between the two is to account for the differences in experience of One, an experience of emotion within, the other, an experience of someone with that emotion. Principle for the solution. So how do I solve this apparent destruction of psychology or whatever you want to call it? Number one, both self and other exist within the same cosmos. True. Number two, if you don't think that's true, we're in wholly different, nothing, we have to go to a different area. Number two, their existence is only part of that cosmos. You are not omniscient or all omnipresent. You're just like a little part of this existence. Number three, each experience within an existence is within the same cosmos. All minds and representations exist within the same place, the universe. My imagination is not a different world, a different universe. It's in my head in this universe. The cosmos here is the whole realm of existing things that allow a single mind to have independent representations from other minds. We're not hive minds like fucking ants or something like that, or like some AI. It's just all one self. We're independent. Number five, the single mind and its experience is always only part of that cosmos. To make sense, number six, to make sense of the self and other must piece together. This is where philosophers will start, they'll come in like a bulldozer. Because like, what does that mean? Psychobabble, right? The different parts of the cosmos, that which exists within their experience. The piecing together is a process akin to teaching and comprehension that can demonstrate accuracy, but also is fallible. You can be wrong. That's like the empathy thing. The piecing together from self to other never equals the self's experience. So when we talk about something, you tell me that the elephant is over there. That's different than me experiencing it. But you can use language and I can understand your experience about that one thing, right? Knowledge from piecing together must be beyond self and other. Therefore, meta self. It is beyond both. We're all selves here, but from our perspective, that will distinguish which is self and which is other. All of those things is the meta self. It's beyond the self. That's where you'll find God, but not the way that we're told what it is. The meta self is that which exists for all, the self plus the other. It's both of them together. But then you say, what about when we disagree, right? And that would be not a one-to-one ratio. It would not equal. For the one-to-one of self-other, either explanation or experience of self subordinates to the meta-self. That is the smoking gun premise. What did you just say right there? For the one-to-one of self-other, either explanation or experience of self subordinates to the meta-self. That means that my experience can be wrong, and my explanation of that experience can be wrong. Whether it's me experiencing an emotion in myself, or it's me observing the other person's experience. But it's relative to the meta-self. And it's not that mediocre property you identified before. It's a different thing, right? It's really just critical thinking and reasoning and being philosophical. Both self and other, this is number 12, last premise. Both self and other apply principles to make sense of independent experiences with each other. For meeting of the minds to occur, which is this piecing together thing I'm talking about, just knowing what someone means. Understanding of the nature of experience and how language is applied to that experience is necessary. The difference in existence claim is due to the way phenomena is being observed. So again, the existence claim is, I'm the angry person. I'm upset with that person. I don't see my anger. You see the anger though, right? So what exists? Does the anger exist, or aggressiveness, whatever you want to call it, right? Like the teacher who shows specific modes of observation, this is how you see the thing, so a student doesn't have to waste time looking for ways to see it. All must follow principles of reality, which is just like saying scientific principles and reasoning, so that we can see what someone is talking about. The self and other both must satisfy this requirement. The psychologist and subject must conform to properties of consistency, that when operationalizing the phenomena with some set of words, it is consistent and accurate. If the believer says, see, that flicker was the government starting the recording, they are watching us now, we can explore this claim and determine accuracy from it. Similarly, if the person's saying, you're racist, and the subject stating, I chose Jeff because he won the last game, is also up to the same scrutiny. It is neither the self nor the observer who has ultimate authority on what exists. So I'm responding to that second criticism you said. We'll come back to it though, right? Let's just let the plane land here. What does it mean for psychology and teaching? Well, for psychology, being a psychologist, mastery in the study of the soul, psyche, or mind is an awareness of the process. I didn't know I was going to end up here, but this is where we are. When I was writing it, right? I had no idea where we were going to go, but this is where now we're at this island. Okay. Because the wind was taking us there. Being a philosopher is like sailing a little bit. You don't know if you can't really direct exactly where you're going to go, but you got to follow the reasoning. You got to follow the wind. You got to follow the boat and the sails and follow the currents, and then you'll get somewhere, right? Is an awareness of the process of piecing together based on the principles of reality, which is just critical thinking and science stuff. This is a practice done through observing, communicating, and correcting. Psychology has the power to condemn the subjective experience by the other. This power has gone awry, as seen in the first asylums, the prefrontal lobotomy, homosexuality not being removed from the DSM until 1973, and the ethical, philosophical, scientific, not falsifiable issues of Freud's use of psychoanalysis. Psychology has a duty to itself and people it observes to implement self-correcting mechanisms to ensure that an incorrect observation or explanation is not being used maliciously, incorrectly, or inappropriately. Next, people. So what I'm doing is I'm destroying the argument from authority. I'm saying that there is no such thing as authority. There is a process. Because it's almost like you could say authority will always be used for an abuse of power. Always. Why else is it needed? Just paddle the boat. You're good to go. People can learn, right? Because what is it? I have the paddle. I am the powerful one. You must obey me or I will smack you in the head with the paddle. It's like, come on. Just everybody has a paddle. I'll smack you back then. You don't want to get fucking smacked, right? People can learn the principle of reality. i.e. Thomas Kuhn's criteria of adequacy, critical thinking, logic, observation methods, ethnography, case study analysis, etc. So we're melding together being scientific and also being philosophical so that they can defend themselves to the observation explanation of others. If someone goes through these principles, they usually distill out a clear perspective of their experience, i.e. a depressed person learning CBT and mindfulness, they cure themselves of depression, right? So even if you disagree that you have depression, and someone says you have depression, if you go through this checklist, you'll actually alleviate the depression, even if you didn't know it was there, right? Teaching is similar. We lost the one student who wanted to hear this part. Can we just take a couple of seconds here because I don't have to fucking repeat it. Yeah. How are you?
Are you recording?
I'm recording. This is a Dennis moment. Whether Dennis notices this is one of his moments is all on him. He will be forever known in the Encyclopedia of Achilles Justice as the meticulous, conscientious person who was so timed well with his edits, and if not, he'll be known as the monkey vault guy, vaulting from monkey to monkey in the Amazon and its high, what's it's called, canopy of trees. No? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I can't really pause the thing. I have to stop it and start it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's great.
How long it's gonna have?
Just go get him.
It's on the phone.
Yeah. Damn it. I was supposed to. This is for him. You want me to read this? It's okay. We'll take a little break. Take a little break. How are you?
A lot of work.
Yeah.
But like,
But you wanted though.
I want
There you go.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make it like organized and structured. I actually onboard someone today and train, and now she's gonna be like under my supervision.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Moving up in the world. That's great.
it feels good.
That's great. That's good.
Yeah.
Is this book helping at all? The bits and pieces that you've
Um,
absorbed?
well, I don't know, not particular is something, but I guess in general.
Well, habit 3 would be good for the delegation stuff.
Mhm.
How to manage like teams and whatnot, and like how to.
Yeah, this is just my macro team. Just one person, but still.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
We'll see. And I like her so much, get along very well, so I think it's gonna be fruitful.
That's good.
Yeah. And I delegated stuff that I don't want to do because it takes time
Yeah, that's what it's for.
from my core thing that I want to concentrate and enrich. I also been thinking about the January course. We have to take a look.
Oh, do you want to do it today? You can do it today.
If there is a spaces and what the time.
I can do that right now.
Check.
You want critical thinking.
Mhm.
There's 2 different versions of this.
In person.
Okay, this one does
If
not
there
look
is
like it's
any.
open.
Nope.
This specific one, I think you have to just do the other one. This one's online.
Yeah. I don't know if they even in-person option exists.
Yeah,
Critical thinking.
maybe not.
Mhm.
I sent you the link to the one that's available.
Mhm.
Like we can find other ones that are
If-
available.
Yeah, if it's online class, but like still class, that's better than it was. Because the one that I took was just.
I think it's completely online. It's just like you have to read it and do it all on your own.
Yeah. Like, I need a real people interacting with each
Mhm.
other, just like we are. There's a tool that maybe you can like raise a hand or something that will indicate that this is like cut portion.
I'm just gonna tell him there's a huge section in the center that
Mhm.
he has to cut out. I'm seeing if the writing course is available. It's also online. Yeah, we'd have to like look through.
Yeah, we need to see what else.
Hello?
Sorry, I was calling somebody else.
Okay, are you okay?
Yeah, sorry, I called you by mistake.
All right. I'll call you when I'm done.
Yeah.
We can go through these. Like we have to like kind of look at which ones are. I wish there was an easier way. I think I can just do it like on my. There's some marketing classes that are available.
Not selling anything. I mean, I do, but I just stick to my strategy. Works well.
It's good. Yeah, it's good.
When doing consultation, it's still attracting also. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna like pull up my service hub thing. It's easier for me to like search which classes are available using this thing.
I actually need to see what requirements needs in order to become a consultant or paralegal, like what are the steps?
Okay.
Just out of curiosity.
For consulting?
consultant or paralegal.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. That's different. You'd have to go to the college for that, I think. There might be paralegal stuff here, but that's like, that would be a different thing than if you want to take courses at TMU.
I'm just starting off.
I would do that at the college first, maybe. Okay. Yeah, we can look at this stuff later. David, what's going on?
You know where the VC?
Hmm?
I don't see him.
I don't know. It was right there a few minutes ago. Okay.
How are you?
I'm okay.
What classes?
I had to drop a bunch of them because of that stuff that happened at the beginning of the semester. So I'm just doing this meta philosophy class, marketing, and addictions. So I'm going to do 3. I'm still a little bit behind, but it's fine.
I thought they like marketing.
It's great. It's really important, I think.
Oh, you wrote something about the retreat chat.
Yeah. One of the guys messaged me, so I said we can do a meeting this weekend if you want. Talk about different approaches and things.
Mm. Okay. Was it personal?
What?
That's the personal.
Oh yeah. I just talk about it now just because Dennis, if he doesn't cut it, then it's there. It's okay. It's good. I'm just kind of like, I'm doing a lot better. Like me having less classes just makes my life so much easier. I'm always in like terror mode because I have like a million things to do and no time to do them, you know? After taking that sleep class this summer, I was like, okay, it's really important to sleep, you know?
Oh, you took a sleep class.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It's the psychology of sleep. Well, there's just like there's all these different parts of your brain that deactivate so that you fall asleep. And there's different disorders that people have in reference to sleep. And yeah, there's like this activation synthesis model that your brain is like, different parts of it are like condensing information while you sleep. And so you're just seeing a visual representation of that and it'll be different depending on, or very emotional if it's REM or non-REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Interesting.
like being drowsy is almost equivalent to drunk driving. It's really important not to be sleepy when you're driving.
True. I experienced that.
Yeah, because it's the vigilance. So you can't pay really close attention for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
So
I found myself a couple times just like literally like falling asleep. Wow. And it's
not good.
whoa, so dangerous.
Especially if you're
You
doing.
can actually fall asleep
Yeah.
while driving. Like before, I thought, no, that's not possible because you're behind the wheel, you're paying attention, you're like your eyes on the road. But it is possible, even though you're like in an action. It's still, if you're super tired, you're just gonna.
Yeah, they like use an EEG meter, electroencephalogram thing. It has all these nodes in your brain, and they can monitor your brain waves. And even though you think that you're awake, they can measure the dips and your like attentiveness and stuff. It's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at how long that dip occurred for, and you look at how fast some people are going, it's like, very long distance. You were actually unconscious. It's like, like many seconds of having your eyes closed. You know what I mean? That's what it's equivalent to. So it's super dangerous. And yeah, sometimes you just have to take a step back from things, and I've kind of been in that mode recently and just think about what I want to do with my life, almost like give everything up and just be a singer. I'm like, fuck it. You know what I mean? Just be a fucking metal vocalist.
You're dangerous.
And And so that's still an option for me. I started playing guitar more. And I hung with this drummer the other day. That was cool. He's a good guy. And yeah, so.
Well, what about balancing? Because it seems like you're jumping, you're taking too much on your plate.
Yeah,
With
for sure.
studies?
Yeah. That's because I'm trying to like catch up. I'm trying to like learn all this stuff.
Well, but you
Just
can
cram it all
learn like everything.
Yeah.
Just stick to something.
I'm going to apply for my master's and PhD this year. And so by the time I'm 45, I can have my PhD, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to apply at like Western and UFT. And we'll see what the acceptance is. It's just going to cost me some money to pay for these applications.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You taking OSAP all this time?
I have been, yeah. So I have to like request a refund for these courses because I'm dropping them. That way the money just goes back to the OSAP.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
But I have to take a process. I have to do it. Like today I started at like 1 p.m. I was just preparing all day for like teaching,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And which is fine, but kind of like Wednesdays are just they're for this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even enough time. Like there's other things I could be doing for the organization, you know, I just don't really have the time to do it or whatever. But it's like whatever. I'm making progress. Things are good. They're not bad. They're definitely good. I have not even started this. People can learn the principles of reality, and I define what that is. Kuhn's criteria of adequacy, critical thinking, logic, observational methods, so being scientific, with like ethnography, case study analysis, etc. So they can defend themselves against the observation and explanation of others. That's like if the student disagrees or if the subject disagrees with the observation. If someone goes through these principles, so if someone says you're depressed and you disagree, as a depressed person, if you go through these other things, you would distill out a clearer perspective of your experience. A depressed person learning CBT and mindfulness, and they cure themselves of their depression. Teaching is similar. The teacher and student can follow the same principles of reality in their communication of what exists. The teacher, like a veteran bird watcher of the area, knows where and what time to wait for the bird to pop up. The teacher has experience and knowledge to demonstrate to the student what exists through proof and discuss the instance of existence to other instances the teacher has observed. The student then is able to connect the actual experience of existence to experiences they only know through testimony. So again, the student hasn't seen the cardinal, the bird, but the teacher or the master observer has seen the cardinal like 1,000 times, right? And so the teaching is distilling out those 1,000 existence instances so that the student can know where to find it themselves without all that stuff, right? That's the purpose. Like, why else would you do it? That's why. You know what I mean? It's not this authority thing where it's a patronizing, condescending thing, like that power structure. The teacher must, be accurate in their personal observations. They need to not have psychosis or a hallucination. They have to really see the thing. Like, you have to do that. You can't not know what the fuck you're talking about. Be correct and comprehensive. Show through, for example, predictability in their understanding of the phenomena beyond the first instance of existence. So we may see the thing now, but if you know it, you can draw from all of those instances, right? That will elucidate more than just this one correlation that I've seen it exist here. That's all I can draw from. But for you, if you've seen a rainbow many, many times in different contexts, I'm not just going to say that it's the building spewing out paint from this perspective. I say, no, I've seen rainbows in trees, and they occur in many different contexts. And so my comprehension would be more robust. Be truthful to the student about claims of the phenomena in question. I think of a religious teacher who engages in indoctrination, preventing questioning or criticism. Someone who's like unethically directing the student and saying this phenomena doesn't occur. And the one criticism against wokeness could be that, right? Or a criticism from wokeness against like a critical race theory or whatever. Say, no, we need to accurately represent racism so we don't commit it in the future, right? So don't lie to people that it didn't exist. Be able to show to the student the existence of the phenomena or the lack of. Most use academic journals. Some, like in a grade school science, you can use demonstrations in class, like the baking soda volcano. Some psychologists are indoctrinated into the terminology, and cannot clearly define. Sometimes I'm like, who wrote this? I'm like, oh yeah, I did. Cannot clearly define or demonstrate existence. For example, how do we account for attitude change, self-perception theory, or cognitive dissonance? How do you clearly define the mechanism at work when someone's attitude or belief changes? What was the thing we are trying to discuss? Attitude, feelings, beliefs. Are these not the subjective experience of the self? What does the other have to say about them? Allow the student to practice using words to phenomena, but emulating the teacher's successful interaction and understanding of the phenomena. So you need to let the student practice. Is this a book? Yes. Just when you're teaching kids language, same thing, right? Correct the student when they are right and break down when they've made an error, so the student can expand their comprehension, making the same so that making the same error does not occur. If one comprehends, they will not make the error. Errors are a sign of lack of comprehension. Eventually, that specific teacher is not necessary until they have learned more to share. In the meantime, the student can find other teachers or come back when there's more learning to be had from that one person. So that's what the teacher has to do to be a teacher, really. Like, wow, it's not going to make sense otherwise. You were a good teacher because, so then I said to this specific professor, you're a good teacher because you demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of your courses. You're getting the students up to speed by showing them the beginning of everything a professional would. We're going to read from the book a little bit and see.
So why does this? I know. So teaching cannot be can be not using. Well, what about how come just they even criticize the meritocracy, like the elites betray their people. Actually, the whole idea of elite is against equalness.
Yeah, I don't really see it. I think the concept of elite goes against meritocracy, right? I don't really believe in that. That's like the Holocaust was founded upon ideas of eliteness. I don't believe in that. I'm a humanist. I believe that people have the capacity. Like there are, like the closest thing you can get to by criticizing that I see things in an elitist form is when I talk about cognitive capacity. There is some distinction, and it's not like by race or by gender or by sex. It's your brain. And if your brain's broken, it's not a cultural thing. It just doesn't work, right? And so your capacity to perform or your merit will be depreciated by that, right?
What about they say, the whole thing you just talk about is so Western, so it's this founded on rationalism, whatever. It's very, very Western. There's a philosopher called he developed this called Orientism. Like talk about like this is all very Western centered.
Yeah, but I think that's like
Said, Said, that's the philosopher's name.
Okay, I'm not sure. We're dealing with this critique of Westernism, but I think that's disparaging to non-Westerners to say that they can't think or they can't be reasonable or they don't have minds. It's independent of Western culture or any culture, right? That's what it means to be objective. Being objective is that no matter who you are, you can reach the same conclusion using the same methods, whether those are methods of reason or they're empirical scientific methods.
But they say this is all rational. But in some tribe in Indonesia, like for example, they don't use rationality. They use their instincts. They use the emotions.
Yeah.
So it's equally making sense as using rational, using logic.
Yeah, but it's not, and we can see that because like if somebody gets like some weird disease, they just die, and it's because they just don't have the conceptual technology to be able to or methodology. Empirical methodology to know about penicillin or tuberculosis or whatever, right? Or rabies.
But maybe they say that this is the Western thing. Oh, yeah, you rescue some life, but how? But you make an assumption that the length of life is most important. But what about those 5 things? He lived a short life. His soul goes to heaven.
Yeah, people make all these, even in religious groups, like there's backward rationalization, right? There's like moving the goalposts, so changing the criteria of acceptance when it's disproven, right? Or we've shown some falsification of this thing, like we haven't experienced miracles, and so they say, well, it's not really this, it's a different thing, you know? And so changing the criteria of acceptance is not like a fair medium of exchange. There's like the Asande tribe, where they talk about like they believed in like witch doctors or something like that, you know, or witches or whatever. And they
they normally combine this criticism with colonialism. Like the colonialism, colonialism, somehow they bring the rationalism, the Western centrism, all together, and then the tribe, the people who being colonized, and actually their wisdom, they have their own wisdom. They're just different than yours. You cannot say, this is all from ancient Greek. This is all the Greek and Jewish tradition.
There might be some things like that, but the capacity for reason is a human faculty. It's not relative to some culture. Again, that's more racist to the culture criticizing against Westernism than it is saying there's something wrong with Western way of thinking. Because then you're assuming that you can't think that way, right? Or that the way you've expressed yourself is like less than or something. It's just that there are different results to be had from different approaches to reality. And the mind is the mediator. And so you can use the mind in ways where you'll get consistent results that are not contradictory. It's a form of, it's a technology. And artists will make a similar criticism, but this isn't art, this is philosophy. There's the art of being philosophical, and we can talk about that, but that's not really what we're doing in this moment. That's more of like, there's differences in the ways that people live their life, or like they prefer this specific quote versus this, but there's still rules of reason that apply to both people.
There's a movement called the New Age movement that started in like the 1960s, 70s, when the hippies, when the sex liberation, whatever. So people meditate, the 5 chakra, the chi, there's all kinds of divisions, what's the guy's name? Like the mindfulness.
Eckhart Tolle, that guy?
Yeah. What's the guys in India? That's regarded as a
Gandhi?
Not Gandhi, the other one. I can't remember. There's a lot of controversies around those new movements.
Because they're not scientific. That's why. And then when you break down the concepts, won't make sense. You'll find a lot of philosophical issues and definitions and a bunch of stuff. All right, we're steering the ship back. Okay, so we're going to start at the beginning of this chapter. We're on page 308. And
I'm just curious. What do you guys talk about during the break? Just curious. If you can share.
Just ask me how I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah. And she talk about work. I tried to wait till you got back to continue this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so at the beginning we have take as my guide, the hope of the saint, in crucial things unity, important things diversity, and all things generosity. So yeah, I don't know about the saint stuff. Crucial things. So he's talking about unity, diversity, generosity. Yeah, again, I don't know how well this applies. I think the unity is the synergy thing. Unity and diversity are both synergistic, and then generosity, maybe it's like the abundance mentality versus the scarcity mentality. People can be very competitive and win-lose, but if you have a generous abundance mentality approach, you can be more synergistic. So we can massage out an argument for him out of that one, right? So he says at the beginning, Churchill was called to head up the war effort for Britain. He said all his life he prepared him for this hour. The exercise of all the other habits prepares for the habit of synergy. Synergy is the highest activity in all of life, the true test manifestation of all the other habits put together. So again, we have not defined it yet. Highest forms of synergy focus on the 4 unique human endowments, motive of win-win, and the skills of empathetic communication towards the toughest challenges in life. We create new alternatives. That's kind of what he means by synergy in some ways. An option either of us didn't know about, but we came to another thing once we developed empathy. Okay, something that wasn't there before. So again, as a philosopher, you want to define it right away. That'll help us make sense of what it is. So now he says something else. Synergy is the essence of principle-centered leadership. Well, you haven't been clear again with that. Like that's more habit 2 stuff, right? It's also the essence of principle-centered parenting. Sure. Catalyze, unifies, unleashes greatest powers within people. And he uses the word miracle here. Again, miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, so it's not a miracle. There's no violation of the laws of nature when people work together cooperatively. It's a misappropriation of the use of the word miracle. You could say marvelous. It's an exceptional thing, but it's not miraculous, technically. What is synergy? It means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay. The relationship that the parts have to each other is part in and of itself. They're not only a part, but the most catalytic, most empowering, most unifying, and the most exciting part. He still has not talked about the phenomena itself. He's talking like, he's not really defining what it is. 309. The creative process is also the most terrifying part of the process. You don't know exactly what's going to happen or where it's going to lead. You don't know what new dangers or challenges you'll find. You need a lot of internal security to begin with the spirit of adventure. So again, that goes back to that principle-centeredness, right? That your self-esteem is rooted in sound principles. Spirit of discovery, creativity. With doubt, you'll have to leave the comfort zone and confront new and unknown experiences. You'll become a trailblazer, blah, blah, blah. So he's being kind of poetic here on how good. He's trying to sell it to us, but he still hasn't really defined it. You said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but you need to apply that to social groups. You need to just define why this social group is unique and distinct. Plato said, when we're defining things, it's like you're cutting nature at its seams, the way that you would cut around like a bone, like a butcher would cut around a bone. You're defining this object of nature. Synergy is everywhere in nature. So again, okay, sure. If you plant 2 plants close together, the roots commingle and improve the quality of the soil. So again, he's going back. So he's not really saying synergy. He's saying this whole is greater than some of its parts thing is everywhere in nature. That's true. That's an example of emergent phenomena. But when you're using synergy here, you're talking about a social property, and you haven't alluded to that yet. You talked about like what it's required, what you get out of it, but you haven't made me see it yet, right? Both plants will grow better when than if they were separated. Put 2 pieces of wood together, the whole much more total weight than each separately. The whole is greater than some of its parts. Okay, I get that principle, but you need like if you're just saying socially, you can make the application there, but at the same time, we can talk about this mediocreness or this reduction to the average, like that Heidegger mentioned before.
Because of the issue here is even though even though what he talk about the 2 plants is truth, that doesn't mean it can apply to everything else.
Yeah,
like the social issues, like a merger of 2 enterprises. So sometimes it's a disaster, you know.
Or the Indians at that Sikh temple threatening to kill people and shit like that. You put people together. What kind of synergy is that? A bloodbath?
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's not good. Right.
So what happened in
Brampton. Yeah. So So we have this assumption of like pro-socialness in here too. Right?
What happened?
Oh, there's like these protests about the Sikh separatists that got
between groups.
Yeah, and then like some people representing India went there, and then they were like arguing, and then started. There's a video. This guy has like a hatchet, he's ready to kill people and shit. Super stupid, you know.
It's not that simple. Like putting 2 plants, you know.
I guess he would criticize it, saying they're coming from a win-lose perspective or a lose-lose, and they're also not seeking to understand. So there's never going to be synergy there. That's what he would say, right?
That's right.
Okay. But some things I don't like is when he says that 1 + 1 = more than 2. That's kind of craziness. I think he needs to think of a better example, right? The challenge is to apply the principles of creative cooperation. When we're talking about stuff, we don't want to violate the laws of thought. If we contradict ourselves, it's unwise. The challenge is to apply the principles of creative cooperation. We learn from nature, our social interactions. So family life, there's opportunities to learn, observe synergy, and to practice it. So for example, how through having sex, we can have children brought into the world. That's synergistic. Again, not always though. You know what I mean? Like that's just that again, it's just, I guess biologically, yes, you can say when a sperm and an egg come together, it's greater than just the sperm and the egg apart. The essence of synergy, to value differences, to respect them, build on strengths, to compensate for weaknesses. This part I said before, it's valuing the other person's perspective, but some people can just be clearly wrong, right? They may be incorrect. And so you're not going to value them being incorrect. Maybe you can value their free speech or that they're participating, but again, we need to.
Just curious, why he says men and women bring a child into the world is this synergistic? Is it a little bit more, I don't know.
I feel there's some Christian undertones here. He's like being romanticized about what this is.
You think
No, I think it's fine. I mean, it's just being
you're 7 times
productive.
Okay.
It is synergetic
It
in
is
a way,
synergetic.
yeah.
see.
Yeah, sure. That's great. We obviously value the physical difference between men and women, husbands and wives. What about the social, mental, and emotional differences? Could these differences not also be sources of creating new, exciting forms of life? An environment that is truly fulfilling to each person, that nurtures the self-esteem and self-worth of each, creates opportunities for each to mature into independence and then gradually into interdependence. Sure, yeah, okay. So now we're getting a bit more clear here. That's where I said like an environment of psychological safety that promotes psychological growth. That's a bit more what he's talking about synergy. It's a relationship between people or like the context of the social group, promoting like the psychological state of flow, for example. But he's not saying that, right? That's why it's a little bit lacking, this chapter. Could synergy not create a new script for the next generation? Geared to service and contribution, less protective, adversarial, selfish. So he's talking about being pro-social. That's really what he's trying to get at here. Open, trusting, giving, less defensive, protective. Okay, so he's giving all these things. So next slide. Synergize communication. We need an open mind, an open heart, and expressions to new possibilities, alternatives, and options. Parties will create momentum in gaining insight and learning. Problem of people being trained in scripts of defensiveness and protection. Strategy and a waste of untapped, undeveloped, and unused potential. So we just see how he's comparing and contrasting when it fails and when it's successful. Regular, consistent production of synergy through personal security, openness, and spirit of adventure. So these are kind of things we need to create this synergistic situation. And we can evaluate certain social contexts, whether they have it or not, so they can get to this level. Then tolerance for the ambiguity, hit or miss, trial and error of creative endeavors. So as you're creating things, you need to have this like resilience buffer zone. You can't have like an expectation necessarily. It's about the process, I think. So when you communicate synergistically, you're simply opening your mind and heart and expressions to new possibilities, new alternatives, new options. So this third alternative thing is a big deal for him, right? That it's not just either or. Habit 2, you're fulfilling it. Begin with the end in mind. We're on 310 here. Not sure where you engage in, if you're not sure when you engage in synergistic communication, how things will work out or what they will look like. You do have an inward sense of excitement and security and adventure, believing that it will be significantly better than it was before, and you have the end in mind. Begin with the belief that parties involved will gain more insight. So again, begin with this belief. I think it's important to be hopeful, but also be mindful of the self-fulfilling prophecy. We don't just want to feel good about hanging out. If the goal is to have like result, if the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, then the sum of its parts can't be the measure of synergy. The whole has to. So what is the whole, right? It can't just be your sense of excitement. That's a part, because that's you. It has to be something beyond you, right? So just feeling excited, is that what it means to be synergistic? You're just excited? No. Because those people in Brampton, they had some excitement there, right? They're holding a hatchet, threatening violence. That's not good.
You just talk about maybe he will say, oh, those people have a win-win.
Yes.
But what if like we see in human history or even now for example what happened Ukraine and Russia people think the other side is evil maybe religiously maybe some religions think, oh, those people who don't believe in our religion should go to hell. There seems no room for like if their belief is already defining, it's very against each other.
Yeah.
How can you have win-win? You know, that it seems like a water and fire. You know, it's not like a two company. You know, we saw this in Middle East. How can people have win-win?
Well, part of it is
because
that
their belief is already the definition of that belief is that you should go to hell or something like that.
yeah. Well, part of the thing is that you can have a no deal, right? Like when we talk about certain, like we're assuming cooperation with certain things, you know? And if someone is just, it may not be appropriate to be negotiating when someone's throwing rocks at you. You know what I mean? When like it's danger is imminent, it's beyond the point of reason. Like the principle would be don't argue with a fool, right? Or someone who's like going to be violent or whatever.
So sometimes, you know, so win-win has some precondition for win-win, right? It's not like, oh, you can apply that to every situation.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be like, go back to habit 2. What are the goals? Our Hamas, our goals are to destroy the Israel people, right? Well, the fucking goal is fucked up, right? And so you would say, how is that a worthy value or goal? And we have to like evaluate that mission statement of Hamas and say, how is this goal, you know, if there's many reasons to criticize that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we here? So you begin with the belief that parties involved will gain more insight, excitement of mutual learning, and create a momentum towards more insights, learnings, and growth. Okay, so I think the growth property and learnings, sure, those are outcomes again. And you would just argue that synergy is a better way to get there, right? Many people, they're not experienced in a moderate degree of synergy in their family life or other interactions. They're trained and scripted in defensive and protective communications or into believing that life or other people can't be trusted. Result, they're not really open to habit 6 and these principles. A great tragedy and waste in life. Many potential people remain untapped, completely undeveloped and unused. Ineffective people live day after day with unused potential. They experience synergy only in small peripheral ways in their lives. Okay, sure. You still really haven't distinguished this social phenomenon for me. You've talked about its results and stuff like that, but it as a thing, like how do I know it's not a gazelle and a deer? How do I know it's not a deer and a moose? The outcome is they leave tracks in the snow. The outcome is that they eat some food or they're eaten by wolves, you know, like, but what is the thing?
Yeah, I especially after so many writings, so many words.
There's still no.
Yeah.
Because he defined the whole as greater than the sum of its parts, but you didn't connect. It's not a valid argument to the other habits yet.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
just keep saying.
That's what I'm saying. It's conceptually, it's like we need to have a bit more. You talk about empowerment. We defined empowerment a couple weeks ago, right? And so you can talk about that. Okay. They may have memories of some unused creative experiences. For example, in athletics, they're involved in some team spirit thing, or emergency situations where people cooperated to a high degree and submerged their ego and pride in an effort to save someone's life or produce a solution to a crisis. So events may seem unusual or out of character, or again, miraculous. We're going to cross that word out. That is not a real thing. Marvelous. It can be marvelous. These things can produce regularity, consistency almost daily in people's lives. It requires enormous personal security and openness and this spirit of adventure, I guess. Okay, sure. Creative endeavors are, so this is where it's getting a little psychobabbly. We're like, well, you haven't been clear yet, you know? All creative endeavors are somewhat unpredictable. They can seem ambiguous, hit or miss, trial and error. Unless people have a high tolerance for ambiguity and get their security from integrity, principles, and inner values, they find it unnerving and unpleasant to be involved in highly creative enterprises. Need for structure, certainty, predictability is too high. So again, a lot of this, he's making these empirical claims without any data, very unscientific. He's just kind of talking based on his personal experience, right? Which is fine, but you need to do that and be a little scientific. You need to bring that in too. It will make your argument more robust. Next slide. Synergy in the classroom. So it tests teachers and students' openness to the principle of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Sure. No one knows exactly what will happen. Okay. Which is fine. You know, you don't have to necessarily know, but again, predictability is important as one of the properties we criticize any theory for. Brainstorming necessitates subordinating evaluation for creativity, imagining, and intellectual networking. So brainstorming is the first real concrete distinct property that's different than the previous stuff. It's a little bit in the section on seek to understand, but it's a bit different. And then the group collectively subordinates old scripts and writes new ones. Okay, that's cool, but it's not necessarily the case that old scripts are bad, right? You'd have to, like, I think old and new is not a cookie cutter thing we can just apply to stuff. That doesn't make sense. Next slide. So you get the university class abandoned. So this university class, they abandoned their syllabus. This is an example. So one person related a powerful emotional experience, leading others doing the same. So in this class, someone had like a very like outward experience, and people, it kind of had like a domino effect to the people. Everyone fed on each other's experiences and insights, leading to creating new meaning to the class. There's a sense of maturity, stability, and substance that transcended the old structure and plan. They abandoned their syllabus, their course outline, and the textbooks for a new purpose, project, and assignments. So he basically just did habit 2 with these students, where you begin with the end in mind together, or you decide together what you're doing. So that's why it kind of just, it's not distinct from other habits in the book.
Is it because he wrote this chapter to feel the magic number?
Maybe
7? Because 7 is a magic number.
Okay, maybe.
God created world in 7 days.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It could have been the 6 habits of highly effective people. It didn't have the 7. He wrote a book containing learnings and insights on the print. So they wrote a book later, him in this class. Once one person had the courage to be open and authentic, others followed, beginning in the synergistic process. So that is an empirical criteria. He's making a causal claim here. And what we would like to see is a series of studies with a control group. That does not exist, right? So that makes it less scientific.
Control group. Like you're doing a focus group?
Yeah, you'd have a group you'd have one group that has the authentic person who is like getting excited. And then you'd have another group where there's no authentic person, and you'd see if the control group had synergy as well. There is some evidence for something like this though. So there was this guy who was like talking about persuasion, right? It's like a TED talk on this. And he had 2 Confederates in the crowd, right? And he gave this speech, and he just said craziness. It was just like, the tiger's yellow lips are on the moon Tuesdays with ice cream. And it's very important that the mechanism is on top of the force when it's being applied to the moon going around the sun through the engine of the atmosphere. It just completely just nonsense speaking, right? Like they made sure it didn't make any sense. And at the end, people were like, they showed people that they're like confused, like this doesn't make any sense. But he was like, and you must see that the lizard's teeth are green on sun. Like he was very convinced, right? And he got more intense. Like even though he was reading craziness, the intensity of his speech increased until the end. And at the very end, these 2 people stood up and they're like, yeah, that was amazing. Like they just totally like made it look like they conformed, and they gave an evaluation of his speech, even though it was crazy. And then other people did a standing ovation for him.
Yeah.
And at the end, he was like, so just so you guys know, we were doing an experiment on conformity. And I read you the most incoherent text that makes no sense. And we put these 2 people, and they waved, these 2 people in the audience, and and if those 2 people weren't there, people would have been like, they wouldn't have said anything, right? They wouldn't have given him applause. So going back to this, when he says one person had the courage to be open and authentic and others followed in the synergistic process, there might be a psychological phenomenon here, right? In this conformity thing. But he didn't say that. I'm putting that in for him.
Okay, yeah, the conformity things, one of the good examples is that, Hitler is a very good presenter. Even before he came to power, you look at his speech, it was like, and then people just conform, without too many people really analyze. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But this brings another question, because it seems like what we talk about here, we should have data, we should prove, we should have that sound reasoning, whatever, to persuade people, so that people can understand. But if you look at really in the human history, like when the big thing happened, sometimes it's from guts. It's not from reasoning. For example,
Sure.
like the U.S. independence revolution. It's not like they talk to the British, about, oh, let's make sense. Oh, my argument is better. The way we govern the country is better than yours. No, they just overthrow it. They just got,
Pissed.
yeah. So with the French Revolution, whatever, so sometimes they quit.
It's like Bangladesh. They got fucking pissed off.
Yeah, they criticize the scholars, approach. Like, oh, we give you data. Actually, you see, it's not through reasoning. The real change is not through reasoning. There's a philosophy. Actually, it's the philosopher Hitler called what's his name? His whole thing is about political theology. Political theology. So it talk about the exception, like during the COVID, the government sometimes just launched very strict order
Mandates.
Like we are in an exceptional state.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to use power.
Mm-hmm.
Some people even say Donald Trump came to power is because people need a strong man.
Yeah.
It's not about reasoning, but about action.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, like in terms of leadership, people perceive strong leaders as more competent. That's whether that's true is a different thing. Just a demonstration of confidence is not equal to performance. So I think that on the other side of emotions, it is a motivating factor for sure. Like I said last time, Hume the quote from Hume is, "Reason is the slave of the passions," right? So,
the guy is named Schmidt.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hitler's philosopher.
Okay, was he the propaganda guy? I forget. Or is that
No,
Goebbels?
that's another guy. The propaganda guy. It's he's a solid philosopher. His student, including a lot of people. There's a whole branch of political. So basically, the idea is the most important thing he said in political is not about reason or talk. It's about recognizing who is your enemy and who is your ally. That's number thing in politics. It's not about talking about the human rights, what the freedom. No, political is about power. That's what it says. Right. It's actually dated back maybe to Nietzsche.
Well, they definitely reference that. Usually, people say that the philosopher of the Nazis was Nietzsche because they talk about the Übermensch and how they equated that with the Aryan race and that everyone has less than them and the will to power and shit. So it was a misreading of Nietzsche, and it sucks for Nietzsche and shit. But yeah. Okay, let's continue. The bus keeps on going. Next up. The more authentic and genuine expression about personal experience and self-doubt allows others to relate and feel safe to express themselves. So sure, yeah, like it's one person had that and people could emulate and model themselves off that. That's cool. That's an empirical thing we can study. You know what I mean? New insights, perspectives, and paradigms open options and alternatives. So this is the kind of like a brainstorming methodology. Okay, so yeah, synergy in the classroom. So 311, as a teacher, I had come to believe that many truly great classes teeter on the very edge of chaos. Synergy tests whether teachers and students are really open to the principle of the whole being greater than some of its parts. There are times when the light turns off consistently today.
Synergy.
For some reason. I don't know why. Times when neither the teacher nor the student knows for sure what's going to happen. And I like that. That's the process of discovery. That's when I'm doing like the whiteboard talk, which you didn't really get unless you watched the previous ones. But sometimes I do a whole whiteboard session, which is almost funner for me in some ways. But yeah. In the beginning, there's a safe environment that enables people to really be open and to learn and to listen to each other's ideas. Then comes brainstorming. The spirit of evaluation is subordinated to the spirit of creativity, imagining, and intellectual networking. Absolutely unusual phenomenon begins to take place. The entire class, is transformed, but again, was transformed. So I'm not sure if it's, again, like the entire class here is transformed. He's making this almost like a necessary set of steps, but it hasn't been really fleshed out scientifically or empirically. With the excitement of a new thrust, new idea, new direction that's hard to define, palpable to the people involved, synergy is almost as if the group collectively agrees to subordinate old scripts and write a new one. Again, we can talk about Hegel's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This process of how theories develop and evolve, right? Where we have a proposition, there's the contradictory notion of this proposition, and then there's the combination of both of them, right? The synthesis. So we taught a university class. It was a leadership, philosophy, and style class. Powerful personal experiences that were both emotional and insightful. Humility and reverence fell upon, reverence like a Christian term, fell upon the class. Reverence towards individual and appreciation for their courage. Spirit became fertile soil for a synergistic and creative endeavor. Again, he's using this word synergistic all over the place, and it's just more like a feeling now. Like, what does it really mean? People felt good, that excitement thing, you know, like when we're learning the meaning of a word, we can look at how the word is used using our Wittgenstein Wizard's Tower, right?
So you mean for a good written book article, you should use well-defined terms?
For the standard way to philosophize, defining your terms is like the first thing. I think that's what Plato, and one of the things Plato meant when at the roof of the academy.
Why you have to define it clearly?
Because if you don't define your terms, you get into all these miscommunications. That's actually, he's almost violating his own principles. Like, to be understood. To be understood, I need to have the courage to speak what I'm saying or what I have in mind. But you haven't clearly said that. Right? First seek to understand, sure, but then you need to say your stuff. You need to clearly define your stuff. And if I don't clearly define it, I can fall into fallacies of ambiguity, fallacies of equivocation, right? Not good. So you want to prevent that by having clear definitions. It's important.
Okay, so this brings another, because I like to bring it to the real issues. I'm not. The consentment. Like these days, if you want to have dating
Consent,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So they say you should have but some people criticize. Oh, that's everything is make it so clear, so boring. We're like a robots.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you know that people have feelings?
Mm-hmm.
Everything we need to consent. Oh, I see you. Can I do this? Can I do that? That's not romantic. It's so boring.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? There's some people argue that clearly define everything makes us very like a machine.
Yeah. Like it ruins the mood almost, And I think that like getting to know somebody and being comfortable with them and taking your time and being empathetic to their feelings is important. And there's like making a move, and I think it's just start small. Don't just like you start with just like hugging somebody or saying that you like them, and you see if they reciprocate, and you slowly build towards more intimate or sexual forms of contact, and if the person is open, and if there's a moment where they're not comfortable and they give you some physical or behavioral signs that they're pulling away or resistant, then you stop, and so you don't have to explicitly say it, but you can be empathetic to their emotions and their behavior. And that may show consent. And as long as you just don't go too crazy too far, then if they are uncomfortable and they don't really feel comfortable, then they don't feel comfortable and you can read that, then you can stop at that point,
Is it because of for the legal reason? Because these days, it's
just
everything is about legal. I need to be whatever,
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not nearly representative of like natural mating contexts. Some relationships might get to the point where the people can say, hey, do you want to have sex? And then you can say, yeah, sure, let's go do it. You know what I mean? But it's generally, that's not the case, And so I think that it's important just to kind of go slow and get to know the person. And and then you can still have that romanticized thing without overanalyzing things or making things explicit that didn't necessarily have to be said. But communication is really important too. So it's like you have to kind of like know this person and then kind of make some sense of the moment.
It's an art.
Part of it's an art or a craft, you could say, or a skill. The Venusian arts, Okay. So university class. So deeply involved in the process. The teacher, he was memorized because it seemed magical, creative. He was loosening up his commitment to the structure of the class and seeing new possibilities. A sense of maturity and stability and substance transcended the old structure and plan. They abandoned the syllabus and the textbooks they had, page 312, the presentation plans, etc. Became excited over the next few weeks. There's a desire to share what was happening with others. They ended up writing a book containing their learnings and their insights on the subject of the study, principles of leadership. Yeah, so he's just repeating himself. They changed assignments. They worked harder than they would have. Out of this experience emerged a unique, extremely cohesive and synergistic culture. Again, synergistic here, like what are you even really saying there? Like it's hard to clearly see exactly what it means here now, you know? They did not end, it just, for me, it's almost like an orgy of ideas. Like it doesn't even really make sense what he's really trying to say, you know? We had all these paint colors and we just mixed them all together.
Exactly. If you compare to some of the other master book like the Republic from Plato, or
Sure.
you don't see this abundance of words. You know, like their words are very concise. You know, like every you know some masterpiece. You know,
Yeah,
like
sure.
they don't repeat. You know, they make things. You know.
You can give examples to explain things, but he's not like, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he really understands what he's trying to say. It's hard. So in this thing, it's not conceptually clear. Like later on, if you compare it to how he wrote the other chapters, you have diagrams and all these things like this is exactly what's going on. Like, okay, sure. It makes sense. It's clear, right? Let's just continue to see where we're going with this. Yeah. So, okay. So even years later, they talk about it, they try to explain it. So it's interesting to him how little time went by and they were able to create such synergy again. So in this, they created such an outcome. Synergy almost seems like an outcome in this. So there's very fallacious in the way this is written with equivocation. The same word is being used with different meanings here. So it's hard. But if you have different meanings, you get at the beginning, say synergy means these three things. 1, 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. Like, okay. It is a product of, he kind of does that, but it's still not clear exactly what's going on in this group.
Okay. So this is
But he gives an example, and I think that's what it is. He's trying to describe with the example of, the class being together, aiming for the same goal, or not even have a goal, but working towards something that's just arise in a classroom. That's what synergy.
Yeah, but then I say, remember habit 2, when he says the organizational mission statement, what's the difference then? It seems like the same, it's the same thing. That we all contribute our identity or perspective into this goal. We're all part of the goal. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's the same thing. Right? So I'm like, how is this different? How is this habit 6? Let's continue. Let's just keep on going.
One more.
Yeah.
One more second. So I think you're about it. But the other thing is can you say again, because you said if we don't define things clearly, it will cause miscommunication.
Yeah.
Why? If you don't define things clearly, it will lead to miscommunication.
So an example would be from statistics, right? So there's type 1 and type 2 errors. So we can have false positives where we think something is there, but it's not supposed to be there, right? And then false negatives. We don't think it applies, but it actually did. So you have a Venn diagram. You put something in the circle and it shouldn't have been there, or you didn't put something in the circle and it's supposed to be there, right? All of the red objects, and then I put this in the red object thing. That's incorrect, right? So when I say all the red objects, I'm clearly defining what goes in the category. That's one reason why defining stuff is important, is that you're going to have stuff that doesn't belong in.
Hard to define.
Then, well, then what did he say? Was it Wittgenstein? He's like, then let it pass in silence. Just don't say anything, right?
Well, we cannot say. Don't not say anything. We have to say something, but it's we have a different definition. So
yeah, well, don't be writing a book about it. What do you write? Like, go back to the thing I said before. If you're the teacher, then I expect a comprehensive, knowledge base to explain the phenomena. Right? Remember the letter I wrote. So, if you say that there is a thing there, you have to be able to explain what that is through definition, and then demonstrate it exists. Right? So he's kind of I just would like a little bit more clarity, personally, for me.
Okay. Can I use, because both of you are here, I like to hear both. because, for example, can I use the one example in Bible?
Mhm.
Because it says God created heaven and earth, but I don't see a definition of heaven and earth.
Yeah, sure.
Because if I'm here, like if this is the earth, that is heaven, right? But we all know now that the earth is like a ball, whatever, you know. So if we dig deeper into the very deep, the other side maybe it's Japan, you know. The Japan's earth, Japan's sky, the heaven is actually is underneath me.
It's the core of the earth. If up is the same direction.
Yeah, because we are like a ball shape, you know. So here is heaven. Here is also heaven. So then I'm, you know, then my question is, how do I define heaven?
Yeah, for sure. You're correct. How do you define heaven? Yes.
So I'm asking, is this something that, you know, we cannot define?
Well, you can define it. You might not be able to empirically like validate it or point to it. Like the number one, we can define the number one, but can you really point out like the number one? Put in an instance of a single object, but is that the number one? No. So abstract, is it an abstract thing? Is it a real place? You know what I mean? Like we have to determine what we mean by heaven. That's making the definition.
Yeah.
You know, but you could always just sorry.
No, I also like never thought about it as something physical. So it's
Sure.
it's not a
It's not a
place
physical.
on earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an idea, right?
Mhm.
It's an idea.
Yep.
So idea doesn't need to define.
No, you can define ideas. Sure. You can define non-empirical or non-physical entities. You can define things that don't even exist, like the Lord of the Rings. Right?
Mhm.
Okay, the bus continues. Where's the bus going now? So you experienced some things. So, okay. So he's also experienced, sorry, where
Mhm.
Also experience, I believe most people have.
So we're here. So in the final semester of their senior year, so that's one reason why he thinks that. So he's like, well, why were they so successful? They were mature. They're in their final semester.
Mhm.
They wanted more than a classroom experience. Okay, sure. They were hungry for something new, blah, blah, blah. So again, like maybe they said this to him. Who knows how representative this is? It's not scientific. It's just his personal experience, just whatever.
Mhm.
So the chemistry felt right. Okay, sure. There was a certain arrangement or personalities that were complementary that produced this. That's cool. So that might mean that synergy is limited to only certain types of groups, certain types of people, right? But we need to understand that, you know, and that's part of what the thing really is. Is it a goat or a sheep? Can't be both. It's one or the other, technically. They're both animals, but he's being specific. This is a specific phenomena, either about or of, or you know, about or is of a social group, and we need to understand that, or the product of, you know. Producing something new, because if you're reading about this, you're like, well, the whole purpose is like, I want to have synergy too. So how do I recreate it? And as soon as you start going down that path, it's scientific, right? If I follow these steps, I will get the same result. I have synergy. But in this chapter, he's like, don't expect to actually get synergy because you might, or recreate the previous experience. He's almost like covering his tracks a bit because it doesn't really make sense.
Right. Yeah.
So did you read the chapter yet? Okay, it's fine. All right. Just if you're like, if you remember the part. Yeah. Okay. He's also experienced times where it was almost synergistic. It hung on the edge of chaos, but then it descended into it. It became chaotic. People were burned by these experiences, and then they were prejudicial to the new experience with this sense of failure. They would defend themselves and they would cut themselves off. So that's okay. Sure, we can see that's bad. So don't do that. Sure, fine. Don't come up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or like a representative heuristic or an availability heuristic. Administrators who set up new rules and regulations based on the abuses of few people in an organization, limiting freedom and creative possibilities for many. So that's a good critique, right? Or business partners who imagine the worst scenarios possible and then use legal language, and then this legal context kills this creative. And he's also using like creative and synergy as synonyms here, right? Consulting and executive education, 213 experiences, highlights were synergistic. Early moment required some courage. Then it became extremely authentic, confronting some inside truth about the individual or the organization or the family. Took a combination of courage and love to say the things that they had to say. Became more authentic and open and honest. and the synergistic communication process began. So again, in this context, I'm getting synergy as like a back and forth. This almost means dialogue or intimacy, if you want to use the word intimacy. Intimacy defined as dialogue, vulnerability, reciprocation, and transparency. So again, there's a lot of different uses of this word. So it can be a little confusing. What do you really mean by it? It became more creative. And then we had the outcome of insights plans that they never anticipated initially. But there could just be this building upon mechanism that even if people are fighting, they still get the same result, but they just feel like shit. Right? Like, is it the case that feeling good necessarily means that the production quality is either increased or decreased? We have to measure that, right? There is some sense of subjective well-being for like allegiance to the company and the organization, or there's something we can look at there. But yeah, Carl Rogers, that which is most personal is most general, and then he interprets this as the more authentic you become, the more genuine in your expression, personal experiences and self-doubts. People can relate to you. It makes them safer to express themselves. Now he's talking about psychological safety, really, right? Being having an environment that's not like criticizing or bullying. This expression puts feedback on the other person's spirit. Genuine creative empathy takes place, producing new insights. So again, it's this like psychological sense of this social group that's like accepting of ideas and fostering learning in some ways. People begin to interact with each other, almost half sentences, sometimes incoherent. So he's just talking about brainstorming here. Synergy now means brainstorming. They get each other's meanings very rapidly. The whole new world of insights, new perspectives, paradigms, ensure options, new alternatives, thought about. See, if I taught this for the Covey Corporation, they wouldn't want me to teach it this way because I'm being very critical, but that's why we have to do that. We have to be philosophical, right? Again, new alternatives. So that's just like, that's a psychobabble term, These new ideas left up in the air. Some closure, practical and useful. Okay, next slide. Synergy and business. So creating corporate mission statement. So we've already done this, right? This is habit 2. Why is this here, right? Collective free association and spontaneity of ideas. Okay, sure. So that's maybe something that synergy allows us to do. How do we distinguish this from habit 2? Is like, courageously empathetic movement with mutual respect and understanding. But then he's using synergistic again. So that means that is circular, not good. Evolved collective vision into words that was specific and committed to meaning for all. Okay, that's interesting. That's like us. Again, that's more of that whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So different parts are coming together to give a larger meaning. That's good, at least in line with that initial principle. Synergy, how is this synergy though? Establish a frame of reference distinguishing what everyone was about. Sure, but that goes back to the mission statement, which is habit 2. Example 2, insurance company. Traditionally use questionnaires and interviews to identify issues. Past meetings deteriorated into win-lose battles. Instead, executives immerse themselves about the issues and points of view ahead of time. Allowed executives to listen at the meeting rather than defend and protect. So they just want to get everybody's opinions first. So again, it's more of like a psychological safety thing and brainstorming environment. Became open to others' influence and generated new insights and options. New understanding of the nature of the company's challenges. Seek new, again, synergistic experiences around different purposes. Why does the light keep on doing this? And so again, it's just not 100% that synergy in this context is the conditions that allow learning or psychological growth or safety. That's what I'm interpreting it used in this example. So let's just steamroll through this because we're getting close to the end today. So 213 or 313. One meaningful synergistic experience, worked with associates to create a corporate mission statement for our business. All members of the company went to into the high mountains. They were surrounded by nature. They began with the first draft, what they thought was an excellent mission statement. At first, the communication was respectful, careful, predictable. They began to talk about various alternatives. He likes that word alternative. Possibilities and opportunities. He could have just said options or ideas. People became very open and authentic and simply started to think out loud. The mission statement agenda gave way to collective free association. So that's a Freudian thing there, whatever. And almost collective unconscious. He's just, whatever. Spontaneous piggybacking of ideas. People were genuinely empathetic, 314, as well as courageous. We moved from mutual respect and understanding to creative synergistic communication. Okay, again, like it's just, he's being circular, you know, like, well, not really in this one, but it's just, in this context, synergy means you're being respectful, careful. You just take the previous things and you just connect them to synergy. Okay, sure. Everyone could sense it, exciting. Again, it's this emotional based thing. It matured. They put their evolved collective vision into words, each of which contains specific and committed to meaning for each participant. That just goes right back to habit 2. It does not distinguish itself from this habit. So resulting corporate mission statement reads, our mission is to empower people and organizations to significantly increase their performance capability in order to achieve worthwhile purposes through understanding and living principle-centered leadership. That's almost a summary of the book. And again, this is a habit 2 thing. It shouldn't really be in this chapter. It's not, this does not distinguish synergy at all from the organizational mission statement that we talked about before. So this is, he loses a lot of marks here. You actually would get like a 4 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10 if I was grading this, because it's not new information.
Right.
Synergistic process, creation of our mission statement engraved in the hearts and minds of everyone. It served us well as a frame of reference for what we're about and what we're not about. Okay, yeah, but we knew that, right? It's like, tell me what synergy is. Don't tell me what habit 2 is. High level of synergy experience took place when I was accepted an invitation to serve as the resource and discussion catalyst at this annual planning meeting for a large insurance company. Months ahead, he met with the committee responsible to prepare for and stage the 2-day meeting, which involved all the top executives. The traditional pattern was to identify 4 or 5 major issues through the questionnaires and interviews and have alternative proposals presented by the executives. Past meetings were respectful exchanges, occasionally deteriorating into defensive win-lose ego battles. They were predictable, uncreative, and boring. So we talked with the committee members about the power of synergy and consensus potential. The considerable trepidation, they agreed to change the pattern. Requested various executives to prepare anonymous white papers on each of the high priority issues, then asked all the executives to immerse themselves in these papers ahead of time in order to understand the issues and differing points of view. They were to come to the meetings. This is a bit more closer to the whole is greater than some of the parts thing, right? You're getting a little bit different here. Because they're observing all of the parts and they're thinking about how to do it. But you have to always distinguish it from habit 2. How is it different? They were to come to the meeting prepared to listen rather than present. So that's habit 5. Prepared to create and synergize. You're repeating. You can't use really synergy here because you need to like define synergy or whatever. Like if you say go and synergize, what the hell does that mean? Okay. Now what? Right? So that's why it's psychobabble rather than defend and protect. So synergize is like be creative, right? Like what? Like how is create different than synergize? That's what makes sense. You're being creative together. We spent the first half day in the meeting teaching principles and practicing skills of habit 4, 5, 6. The rest of the time was spent in creative synergy. Well, this makes sense. You could just remove synergy and just put being creative or being creative together. 315, the release of creative energy was incredible. So again, look at the term energy here. That's really what he means. And what is creative energy? I don't know. Like where do I put the thermometer to measure your creative energy?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Excitement replaced boredom. People become very open to each other's influence and generate new instances and options. Okay, cool. So it's like problem solving now. Now you're talking about the cognitive property of problem solving in groups. Sure. By the end of the meeting, new understanding and nature of the central company challenge evolved. White paper proposals became obsolete. Differences were valued and transcended. Okay. New common vision began to form. So he has the value of differences thing, right? So it's like valuing what the other person says. Once people have experienced real synergy, they're not the same again. They know the possibility of having other such mind-expanding adventures in the future. Attempts to recreate a particular synergistic experience can seldom be done. So what? Attempts to recreate a partistic synergistic experience seldom can be done. Essential purpose behind creative work. So now he just says creative work. That's all he means. Yeah. Synergy is just creative work. Oh, really? Why didn't you just say it at the beginning? Because it sounds boring. How many nights were you sitting beside your wife with the light on and you're like, I need to snazz this up to sell this book. And then you looked at your batteries and said, Energizer, Synergize, you know? You don't even need to smoke weed to think of that. Like you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, come on. Like, and so he's like the Far Eastern philosophy, no reference. We seek not to imitate the masters, rather we seek what they sought. Okay, sure. There needs to be a footnote there, and then it has to be at the back, right? For a guy with a PhD, come on, bro, let's go. We seek not to imitate past creative synergistic experiences. So I don't want to make past creative things the same, but there should be some methodology for creative cooperation. He could have just called this creative cooperation, and I basically know exactly what he means. Exactly. Saying synergize, like, what do you want me to say, bro?
It's a fancy words.
Psychobabble.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about that today. Seek new ones around new and different and sometimes higher purposes. Okay, let me just quickly just give you guys a definition for psychobabble.
Psychobabble, I love it.
Psychobabble is jargon used in popular psychology. What are examples of psychobabble? A person might say that a friend is anal about keeping his house clean, or someone might claim to be so bipolar when experiencing mood swings. Psychobabble is a derogatory name for therapy speech or writing that uses psychological jargon, buzzwords, or esoteric language to create the impression of truth or plausibility. The term implies that this is from Wikipedia, implies that the speaker or writer lacks the experience or understanding necessary for the proper use of psychological terms. That's exactly what's going on here. Sorry, Mr. Covey, you are still good, but you need to work on this. We're going to make it stronger for you. Okay.
Psychobabble. Can you give another example? Because I'm thinking one call it. You know, a lot of people say, you know, every experience has its advantage.
Mm-hmm.
If you suffer, then you have a suffering experience. It will make you strong.
Nietzsche says that, yeah.
Yeah. So this doesn't matter what kind of experiences you have. You know, every experience will bring some good to you. Is that a
yeah, kind of, but also kind of no. It's just a relativistic thing. You know what I mean? Like
if you have a good relation, it's good for you. If you have a bad relationship, Socrates said it will make you a philosopher. You know, Socrates says if you have a happy marriage, you're happy, couple. But you have a bad marriage, it will make you a philosopher.
I guess so.
So every experience it's okay. It's good.
Yeah, I don't know. I think about that too. Like all life is good life as long as it's life. But then there's no reason to want to improve the quality of your existing life because it's all the same. Goes to the problems of determinism again. That's really what it is.
So is that another like a wishy thing to say that?
It's not psychobabble in that sense. It's more just like it's just relativistic. It's reducing the quality of experience by just saying that all experience is the same. And that's not true.
You see people say that a lot, you know, they'll say, oh, I just had a bad day, you know, I lost my phone, you know, or, oh, but I realized it's a good experience. It just remind me that, you know, I learned something positive from it. So
sure, you can learn from your experiences.
So it's a good, so it doesn't matter, you know, what kind of experience you have.
It does though, because like it's not just the experience; it's experience plus learning plus reflection. Like the experience is not its own thing. It's like once you've made that mistake, you don't make the mistake again. And because you don't make it again, that's the reason why it's good.
So basically, they're arguing if I can reflect.
Yeah.
If I can reflect, then every experience is a good experience.
I wouldn't go that far. I still wouldn't go that far. Right? You reflect on how I was tortured. Like PTSD is the falsification of that, right? Not really reflection per se, because it's intrusive thoughts and flashbacks, but we understand, you know, it's just like reliving the experience is not necessarily a good thing. There has to be like some learning based on it, right?
All right. The suffering makes you mature.
It can, or it could lead to depression and suicide. Some people just suffer for like 40 years, or like they're in grieving. There's no limit to how much I'm going to grieve until the day I die. That's not healthy. It's not functional. It's not good.
But some people say, oh, you should get out of your comfort zone. You should take the initiative to take some challenge and suffer, and then you will grow.
Suffering will occur on its own. You don't need to go looking for it. And when it occurs to you, that is your time to learn to deal with it. There's no need to create suffering. It exists already. It will happen as a consequence of the human condition. You don't need to find it or put it on others intentionally. All right, then we're gonna do this last section and then we'll quit for the day. So synergy and communication, slide 1 of 3. So it's a possibility of significant gain and improvement is worth the risk of openness. So this is why we wanted this outcome, right? So I'm going to be open to get the outcome of gain and improvement. So example, the Atomic Energy Commission. So that's what it was. It was like nuclear fuel. Took weeks to create a high emotional bank account. How do people get to know each other's interests, hopes, goals, concerns, backgrounds, frames of reference, paradigms to create bonding between them? Resulted in the group becoming closely knit together, very open, creative, and synergistic. Rather than opposition and defense, disagreements were approached with an effort to understand. So that's good, right? That's that value of disagreement thing, which will reduce properties like groupthink. So that's a good thing, right? Synergy, I think this response to groupthink, that we're listening to disagreement and valuing it, is distinct from other things in here. Because before it's just I empathize, I understand you, which in some ways is also a value to what you say. So it's still a little, almost though. It's almost distinct. Relation to trust and communication. Low trust, so he gives this diagram. I'll go through the diagram. So if you go to page 316, you can see the diagram. Low trust, defensiveness, protectiveness, and legalistic language. It's a win-lose where there's no production capability balance. Middle trust is respectful, honest, genuine, mature, polite communication and interaction. The middle trust avoids the possibility of confrontations, which limits empathy. It's not defensive, protective, angry, manipulative, or synergistic. It's not looking at the paradigms and assumptions underlying one's position. The problem of compromising is 1 + 1 equals less than 2, right? Parties give and take. Last slide. A high trust is a synergistic, so again, creative working approach. So now if I say creative working approach, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But then it becomes circular. So creative working approach creates exponential benefits. A creative working approach, has exponential benefits for parties where 1 + 1 can equal 8, 16, or 1600. I would not use this example of 1 + 1 equaling anything else but 2, because it just conceptually doesn't make any sense. It's like when people say like less is more. You need to not say contradictory things. Find a different way to explain it so it actually makes sense, right? Produces better solutions than the original proposition, a creation of a mini culture. So he's just explaining like the benefits of these different levels of trust and then how they affect the outcomes of that context. So 315, synergy is exciting. Okay, we said that before. Creativity is exciting. So are they the same thing? Phenomenal, what openness and communication can produce. Okay, that's cool. That goes back to just intimacy, right? The possibilities of truly significant gains. So it could be intimate creativity. We talk about that. Pro-social intimate creativity. That's right. I'm being concrete now. It's not psychobabble.
Right.
Significant improvement. They're worth the risk of being open and transparent and vulnerable. So after World War II, the U.S. commissioned David Lethino to head the Atomic Energy Commission. People who were highly influential in their disciplines. They had their own frames of reference. A very diverse group of individuals had extremely heavy agenda. They were impatient to talk about it. The press was also pushing them. Lilienthal took several weeks to create a high emotional bank account. How these people get to know each other, interests, hopes, goals, concerns, backgrounds, frames of reference, and their paradigms. He facilitated a kind of human interaction that creates great bonding between people. He was criticized for taking the time because it wasn't efficient. So he's getting people to feel comfortable and get to know each other, right? We're almost done. 316. The net result was that this group became closely knit together. They were very open with each other, creative and synergistic. Again, it's really, I don't know what these words mean here. Respect among the members of the commission was so high, if there was disagreement, instead of opposition and defense, there was a genuine effort to understand. So he's reducing the probability of them not listening to each other and being empathetic. It's almost like he's fostering a social context for habit 5, right? Instead of opposition and defense, so this could be in the habit 5 section. There was genuine effort to understand. See, we already know that, right? The attitude was, if this person of your intelligence and competence and commitment disagrees with me, there must be something to your disagreement that I don't understand. I need to understand it. You have a perspective.
Be safe, okay?
A frame of reference I need to look at. Non-protective interaction developed. So he has a diagram which illustrates how closely trust is related to different levels of communication. So you can see right here.
Yep.
there's this diagram. So with low trust and low cooperation is a defensive win-lose or lose-win. Medium trust and medium cooperation is respect compromise, and high trust, high cooperation is synergistic win-win. The lowest level of communication is a low trust situation, which we characterize by defensiveness, protectiveness, and legal language. Covers all the bases and spells out qualifiers and the escape clauses in the event things go wrong. Communication produces only win-lose or lose-lose. It's not effective. There's no production capability balance. It creates further reasons to defend and protect. So that's not an environment of growth, right? Your fight or flight system is engaged. Like we can talk about it this way. Your prefrontal cortex is not working. You're not thinking and reasoning. You don't have the environment for creativity, right? The middle position is respectful communication. A mature person would interact here. They have respect for each other. They want to avoid ugly confrontation, 317. They communicate politely, but not empathetically. They might understand each other intellectually, but they really don't look deeply at their paradigms and assumptions underlying their own positions to become open to new possibilities. Respectful communication works in independent situations, even in interdependent situations, but the creative possibilities are not opened up. In interdependent situations, compromise is the position usually taken. Compromise means 1 + 1 = 1, both give and take. The communication isn't defensive or protective or angry or manipulative. It's honest and genuine and respectful, but it's not creative or synergistic. Produces a low form of win-win. Okay, sure. Again, these are ways we can evaluate groups, right? So maybe you have to look at the outputs to determine if they were synergistic, or you would look at the process to determine if they were synergistic. Still unclear though. We're not operationalizing the term. Synergy means that it's greater than 1 + 1 = 2. Synergy is, you could almost say it's, the reason you can't say it's multiplication is because 1 + 1 × 1 is still 1, right? But it's almost like you mean multiplication, that like, you know, it's more than just adding it. 4 + 4 is 8, 4 × 4 is 16, right? The synergistic position of high trust produces solutions better than the original proposed. All parties know it. Genuinely enjoy the creative enterprise. Many culture is formed to satisfy in and of itself. Even if it's short-lived, the PPC balance is there. Some circumstances in which synergy may not be available and no deal isn't viable. Even in these circumstances, the spirit of sincere trying will usually result in more effective compromise. Yeah, sure. Like in some instances it can, you know, but it's not always the case that it will, right? Like in situations where the person's not reasonable and, you know, it's not a discussion moment. It's just like self-defense. You're running out of a building. It's like, you know. So, okay, we got through almost 10 pages, which is all right.
Yeah.
We had a little detour today. We got through some other good content though, you know.
Yeah.
So next week, we're going to continue with this. We're going to finish this chapter, I'd like.
Yeah.
We're going to start at fishing for the third alternative. This starts at 317. The chapter finishes on 330, and then we have this, his son writes a couple pages on some stuff where there was not anything really, there was one thing that was good. Yeah. But yeah, it's okay. So 337 will finish, and then we'll be at the end of the book, basically. So any final thoughts for today?
I agree most of what you're saying. Yeah. You explained very well the psychobubble, and then, you know, you're being critical about his writing. You're using critical check on his style, on his, you know, I think that's very valid.
We got to do that, but then also be charitable to him.
Yeah.
Try to think of a way that you can rephrase his argument to make it sound.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's why I say, what other words could we use that are equivalent in meaning, but don't have those definitional issues or the psychobabble issue, like pro-social creative cooperation. Okay, that makes sense, right? That excludes a bunch of the cases, like the Brampton violence between the Sikhs and the Indians, right? That's not pro-social, that's anti-social.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll come back next week. We're almost done this book, everybody. So close.